The man beside me received an A-rank talent that could forge soldiers out of iron. My own screen asked whether I preferred round or square windows. Around us, 300 adults were about to be scattered across a hostile world and told to build territories before monsters ate them. Apparently, window shape was my contribution to survival. For several seconds, I simply stared at the floating blue panel.
Round windows, square windows, arched windows.
A smaller line beneath them read, minor comfort preference, no material effect. That was honest, at least. The last thing I remembered from Earth was leaning over a conference table at 2 a.m, explaining for the third time that a company could not save money by firing the only people who knew how its warehouses worked. Then came white light, the sensation of falling upward, and now I stood in a circular stone hall large enough to hold a stadium crowd. Every person around me looked between 18 and 40. Some cried, others shouted at the ceiling, or read their floating interfaces like lottery tickets. A voice rolled through the hall. Transport complete. Welcome to Astera. The screening stopped. Every allocated adult will receive 1 claim core, 1 territorial talent, and 1 land selection. Establish a recognized territory within 72 hours. Failure to establish a territory will revoke protection eligibility. A man near the back raised his hand as if the ceiling might call on him. What happens after protection eligibility is revoked? The voice answered immediately. Predation probability increases. That was a polished way to say monsters would eat him. Panels above the central platform showed maps, territory levels, and a 7-day protection rule. Other lords could not invade during that period. Hunger, monsters, accidents, debt, and legal seizure remained fully available. The Dominion grid protected us from armies, not reality. One by one, people stepped onto the black allocation circle in the center of the hall. The grid read their talents aloud. C rank, Orchard Vitality. B rank, Stone Legion. Recruiters from established factions lined the outer wall with crystal tablets. A good talent earned contracts and supplies. A bad one earned funeral silence. Then the blond man beside me stepped forward. He looked prepared for this moment before any of us knew it existed. Tall, athletic, square-jawed, bright blue eyes, white and red coat without a single crease. Either the grid had taken him from a military parade, or his servants were hiding behind the pillars. Darian Quell, the system announced. A-rank territorial talent. War Foundry. The hall erupted. His panel showed furnaces, armor, and mounted units. War Foundry turned ore, fuel, and trained labor into military equipment at extreme speed. Every recruiter leaned toward him at once. Darian accepted the attention with a restrained smile that had clearly survived years of practice. My father holds Eastwatch, he said when one recruiter asked about his background. I will be selecting territories suitable for expansion. Anyone with a B-rank support or combat talent may apply to accompany me. People moved toward him before he finished the sentence. He had followers, resources, and inherited information within 2 minutes of arriving in another world. Efficient. Also irritating. Then my name appeared above the circle. Cassian Vale. I stepped forward. The allocation stone warmed beneath my boots. Gold lines ran around the circle, climbed my body, and gathered over my right hand. For half a second, the light brightened enough to make several recruiters stand straighter. Then my panel opened. F-rank territorial talent, settlement preferences. The hall became very quiet. A recruiter in green lowered her crystal tablet. The grid displayed my available functions for everyone to see. Window geometry, road width preference, interior wall color, ration flavor priority, banner edge style, curtain density. Someone laughed. That gave everyone else permission. The sound spread through the hall until even a few people who had received D-rank talents were smiling with relief. Human nature was working perfectly. Nobody cared that they were standing one bad decision away from starvation, as long as someone else had received a talent for curtains. I opened banner detail. A prestige slider appeared. At maximum, the preview showed a gold-fringed banner with long ceremonial tassels. I did not yet own land, cloth, or a banner, but the system was prepared to help me decorate all three. Settlement preferences? Darian said behind me. His voice carried without effort. That may have value in an established city. It was a polite sentence. The meaning was simpler. You are useless until someone better owns you. I turned. Darian stood with 7 people, already gathered behind him. A stoneworker, a healer, 2 combat talents, and 3 support specialists. He looked me over once, not cruelly. Cruelty would have required considering me dangerous. My territory will need administrators, he said. If you select nearby land and transfer your claim after protection ends, I can guarantee food and a civil appointment. A generous offer by the standards of a man proposing to own everything I built. No, I said. His eyebrows lifted slightly. You have an F-rank talent. I heard the announcement. You may not receive another offer. That will save time. A few people around him smiled. Darien did not. I could have explained that I had spent years on Earth watching competent people produce miracles for executives who mistook authority for intelligence. I had no interest in becoming useful inside another man's plan. If I survived this world, I would survive above the signature line. Instead, I turned back to my panel. At the bottom of the preference list, almost hidden beneath the decorative options, was a line so faint, I first thought it was a reflection.
Advanced parameters. Locked.
That was more interesting than the laughter. Land selection opened immediately after allocation. Astera appeared beneath the glass floor as thousands of glowing hexes. Green meant farmland, blue water, gray stone and ore. Gold borders marked established powers. The best parcels vanished first. People with strong talents selected river valleys, defensible hills, and intact villages. Darien took a broad, iron-rich plain 2 hexes east of an established road. His followers claimed parcels around him, forming a neat cluster, before anyone else had finished reading the regional warnings. Prepared, connected, and already thinking in borders. I disliked him slightly less for that. My own selection privileges were limited by my F-rank result. The Great offered neglected parcels, abandoned holdings, and land with active survival warnings. Most were exactly as bad as they looked. Another contained a sinkhole currently producing hostile sounds. A ruined village had already misplaced several claimants. Then I found Grayfen parcel. Current population 31. Recognized structures 2, both damaged. Water status restricted. Soil output low. Material output low. Total process loss 82%. Regional dependency, Orvin Malk Water Authority survival rating severe. Everyone else saw a dead swamp attached to a waterlord. I saw a contradiction. Grayfen had people, a mill, a toll house, an old canal branch, and a slate quarry. The parcel did not say nothing existed. It said 82% of useful output was being lost. Loss was not absence. It meant something entered the process and failed to reach the end. Rot, theft, bad tools, diverted water, or broken transport. I opened the parcel history. Grain production had fallen in stages, not all at once. Water access had become restricted. After Orvin Malk upgraded a reservoir west of the basin. Tool replacement costs had doubled. Road loss remained almost exactly 17% every month, even in dry seasons. Fixed loss numbers were rarely natural. Someone had designed Grayfen to fail. That made it dangerous. It also meant the failure had structure. Structure could be changed. Still choosing? Darien asked. He had returned, now wearing a gold-edged claim band on his wrist. Behind him, his followers were discussing cavalry space and ore routes. I found one. He glanced at my panel. His expression changed from mild impatience to genuine disbelief. Grayfen? You know it? My father refused it twice. Orvin controls the canal gate. The quarry flooded years ago. The residents survive by selling reeds and labor. There is mud. Most land is mud if you add enough water. Darien studied me for a moment. Take the servant position, Vale. Pride is expensive in a new world. He was right. Fortunately, I intended to make other people pay for mine. I pressed my claim core against Grayfen's hex. The map flashed dark blue.
Claim route accepted. Transfer in 10 seconds.
Darien exhaled through his nose. Remember my offer when the food runs out. I looked at the neat iron plane glowing beneath his name. I will remember your territory, I said. Then the hall disappeared. Cold air hit me first. Wet ground hit me second. I fell 3 feet into gray mud, landed on one knee and drove both hands down to stop my face from following. My black shirt tore at the shoulder. Mud splashed up to my mouth. I landed beside a cracked toll house, a burned mill, and 31 people who looked disappointed that I had arrived. They held chipped tools, baskets, or nothing. Nobody bowed. Good. Bowing was useless during emergencies. A tall, silver-haired woman stepped forward. Her long braid lay over one shoulder, and a dark teal field coat hung from her lean frame. Brass measuring tools crossed her chest on a fitted leather harness. Her amber eyes moved from my torn shirt to the claim core in my hand. Where do you intend to plant that? She asked. On ground that stays dry. That answer made her pause. She pointed toward a low ridge behind the toll house. There, not beside the mill. The old markers are wrong. A broad man with deep brown skin stood several paces behind her. He was nearly a head taller than me, with a shaved skull, a steel shoulder guard, and an old red sash tied at his waist. His right knee remained slightly bent, as if straightening it cost him. He watched the reeds instead of me. Something is moving, he said. I heard it a moment later. Stalks snapping, mud sucking under heavy weight. A rough, wet breath. The silver-haired woman looked east. Tusker. A shape burst through the reeds. It was the size of a wagon and built like a boar that had lost an argument with a fortress. Dark green hide covered its shoulders in overlapping plates. 2 yellow tusks curved forward from a mouth wide enough to remove my torso. Marsh weeds hung from its back. It saw the glowing claymore in my hand and charged. Everyone scattered. The broad man reached for a spear leaning against the toll house, but the weapon was too far away. I had no sword, no armor, no combat talent. I did have a collapsed cart lying on its side, between me and the ridge. I needed to plant the core before the tusker reached me. The animal weighed more than a house. I only needed its weight to become my problem for a few seconds. I ran toward the cart. The tusker followed, hooves tearing trenches through the wet ground. Its breath hit my back, hot and rotten. I grabbed the broken axle with both hands and hauled. The cart did not move. Of course it did not move. It was half buried in mud. The animal was 6 strides away. I stopped trying to lift the cart and kicked out the rotten support wedge beneath its raised side. The frame dropped. I twisted through the gap between 2 shattered spokes just as the tusker struck. Wood exploded. The broken axle drove up under the creature's chest. Its front legs folded. Its head slammed through the cart bed, tusks trapped between the frame and the ground. It was not dead. One tusk tore free and swept across my left shoulder. Pain flashed white from my neck to my fingertips. The impact spun me into the mud. Warm blood filled my sleeve. The tusker dragged itself forward, one eye fixed on me. Then the broad man arrived. He had reached the spear. He planted his damaged leg, drove the point behind the tusker's jaw, and used his entire body to force it upward. The spearhead punched through the roof of the animal's mouth. Blood sprayed across his arms. The tusker convulsed hard enough to lift the cart frame, then collapsed with a wet crash. For a moment, nobody moved. The broad man pulled the spear free. His breathing was controlled, but his bad knees shook. Bran Oric, he said. Cassian Vale. I heard the grid. That explained the complete lack of celebration. The silver-haired woman appeared beside me and caught my wrist before I pushed myself up. Stay down. I need to plant the core. You need an arm attached when you do it. She knelt in the mud, opened a narrow field case, and cut the torn fabric away from my shoulder. Her sleeves were already rolled to her elbows. Her hands were warm, steady, and much gentler than her voice. The tusk had opened a long groove across the top of my shoulder. Not deep enough to cripple me, deep enough to make every movement pulse. She cleaned the cut with something that burned like concentrated regret. I kept my jaw still. Her amber eyes flicked up. You can swear. I am budgeting my breath. One corner of her mouth moved. Not quite a smile. She wrapped the bandage around my shoulder and upper chest, leaning close enough that her braid brushed my forearm. I noticed the narrow scar crossing her right collarbone, where her coat had fallen open at the throat. I also noticed that the residents were still waiting to see whether their new lord would bleed to death before accomplishing anything. Practical priorities returned. Your name? I asked. Lyra Saren. Is the ridge safe? For a core, yes. Not for heavy storage, unless you cut drainage first. I stood. My shoulder objected. I ignored it carefully, rather than dramatically. Bran lifted the tusker's head with one boot and looked toward the reeds. More blood will draw marshmallows by night. Can the carcass be butchered? Yes. Then we have meat and a deadline. The 31 residents watched me cross to the ridge. Some looked frightened. Most looked tired. They had probably seen other lords arrive with promises, make one bad choice, and disappear down the eastern road. I pressed the claymore into the driest patch of ground Lyra had marked. Blue light sank through the soil. The earth trembled. A boundary line spread outward in a rough hex, enclosing the toll house, burned mill, leaking well, and most of the reed huts. The light passed through people without harming them. It stopped just short of the old canal ditch. Meridian territory established. Level 1. Population 32. Protection 6 days, 23 hours, 59 minutes. Food stability at current loss, 3 days. 3 days. 32 people. 1 dead tusker. 1 burned mill. And somewhere inside a talent for curtain density, a locked menu. I looked over my territory for the first time. It was wet, hungry, damaged, and strategically strangled. It was also mine. The locked menu opened after sunset. I was alone in the toll house, sitting at a table that leaned hard enough to qualify as a slope. Rain tapped through 3 holes in the roof. My bed was a straw pallet in the corner. My dinner had been Tusker meat, boiled until it surrendered, and the territory interface still wanted to know whether I preferred cream or pale cream interior walls. The public panel floated above the table in harmless blue. Prestige, ornament, symmetry, banner detail, and ration variety were consuming something called my calibration budget. I had 100 units. 45 of them were funding prestige, decorative consistency, and banner movement in low wind. My people had 3 days of food, but the future flag was prepared for a gentle breeze. I dragged banner detail to 0. The preview lost its gold fringe. I dragged prestige to 0. Decorative consistency followed. I reduced window preference, wall color priority, and ceremonial road width until my future capital looked like it had been designed by a man being charged per flourish. The reclaimed units gathered in a gold bar at the bottom of the interface.
Advanced parameters available.
I touched it. The harmless blue panel unfolded into darkness. Gold lines spread across it in hundreds of rows. Some were locked, some were grayed out. Others pulsed beside warnings and requirements. Loss rate, aptitude, routing, resource grade, ceiling construction sequence, training conversion, civic recovery template propagation. Locked. For the first time since arriving in Astera, I forgot about my shoulder. I opened loss rate. Current avoidable process loss, 61%. Safe adjustment range, 48% to 12%. Extreme adjustment requires measured baseline, storage control, and assigned manager. A breakdown listed storage damp, milling scatter, theft, rodents, tool breakage, leaks, and false measurement. The talent was not changing curtains. It was changing the operating rules of my territory. My first instinct was to drag the loss slider to 0. The cost jumped past 400 units. Warnings covered half the panel. Insufficient storage control. Insufficient measurement accuracy. No responsible manager. Extreme correction may conceal error rather than remove it. That last warning was more intelligent than several executives I had worked for. The editor could optimize a process. It could not tell me whether the process had been measured honestly. I needed the person who knew where the food was going. I found her in the burned mill before midnight. She was short, freckled, and moving through the dark with a lamp in one hand and a slate board in the other. Copper curls ended at her jaw. A ring of keys struck her rust-red vest every time she bent over a sack. She looked up when I entered. "If you are here to take grain," she said, "there are 2 problems. You need my key. Second, there is almost no grain worth taking. You are the storekeeper?" I was the inventory clerk. Then the mill supervisor dismissed me for recording theft as theft. That seems inconvenient for the thief. It was. He solved the inconvenience by firing me. Tessa Rook? Her eyes narrowed. "Who told you?" "The population register." "Oh." She lowered the lamp. "That is less impressive. I need a complete loss baseline by morning." She stared at me. "Not an estimate," I continued. "Everything harvested, everything spoiled, everything milled, everything eaten, and everything missing." "Why?" "Because the territory is not starving from low production. It is starving because most of what it produces disappears before anyone uses it." Her expression went still. I had seen that look before. It belonged to people who had spent years explaining a problem and had finally heard someone state it back without calling them difficult. Tessa set down the lamp. 61 sacks came in after the last harvest, she said. 24 remained usable. 9 were recorded as damp. 6 went to milling loss. 4 were rat damage. 8 were Lord's levy. 14 vanished between weigh-in and storage. That totals more than 61. Yes. So the records are false. All 3 versions. There were 3 versions. I smiled despite myself. Show me. We spent the night emptying the store. Every sack came out. Every jar opened. Every shelf was inspected. Tessa woke 6 residents who had worked the mill and gave them jobs before I could ask. Nessa, a quiet woman with scarred knuckles, sealed every sound jar she could find. Harl repaired the broken shutter, while 2 others scrubbed mold from the floor. Another pair brought flat stones to raise the sacks above the damp boards. The old measuring scoop was smaller than the standard mark carved into its handle. Anyone paying grain into the store gave a full measure. Anyone receiving grain got less. Tessa held the scoop up beneath my lamp. This is where some of it went. Who controlled it? The former supervisor. He left when the last lord did. Did he leave east? Yes. Toward Orvin? Yes. 1 fixed 17% road loss. 1 false scoop. A restricted canal. Orvin's influence was becoming less subtle with every hour. By dawn, Tessa had a baseline. The residents had sealed the worst wall cracks with clay, lifted the grain, cleaned the mill channel, and replaced the false scoop with a marked jar checked against the claim core standard measure. Only then did I open the realm editor.
Responsible manager detected. Tessa Rook, measurement confidence 93%. Storage control, minimum safe standard.
I spent 47 calibration units. The loss rate slider moved from 61% to 8.4. Nothing multiplied. No mountain of grain appeared. No golden sacks fell from the ceiling. The existing food remained exactly where it was. The changes were smaller and much more useful. The repaired shutters settled into their frames instead of rattling loose. The clay seals hardened evenly, the millstones aligned by a fraction, enough that flour stopped spraying from the side. Tessa's storage labels gained faint core marks that made unrecorded removal visible. The cracked water trough stopped leaking where the residents had already packed it with resin. The system did not create anything. It stopped our work from dissolving after we did it. Tessa recalculated twice. Then a third time. She looked at the same pile of grain that had frightened everyone the night before. At the old rate, spoilage, leakage, and theft would leave us 3 days of usable rations. And now? 23. 26 if I reduced portions during heavy rain. A man near the door heard her and immediately accused her of hiding grain. Tessa did not argue. She carried the slate outside, hung it on the toll house wall, and read every number aloud. Harvested, spoiled, stolen, remaining, daily ration. People crowded around it. The accusation died because the numbers were visible and the sacks were still in the room. I had not produced food. I had sacrificed banner tassels and made theft mathematically difficult. Apparently, that was enough to save 32 lives. They did not trust me yet, but several residents stopped watching the eastern road. We used the next day to repair the well. Lyra found that the stone lining had shifted, and half the drawn water drained back into the mud before reaching the buckets. Bran braced the wall. Tessa counted rope and resin. I moved a small local setting from visual symmetry into water handling loss. The repair worked so well that the next draw filled the trough faster than the bucket line expected. Water spilled over the edge and flooded both my boots. Harl laughed so hard he had to brace himself against the well frame. Lyra looked down at the water around my ankles. Maximum output and prepared drainage are different problems. I had reached that conclusion. She walked away before I could answer. By the end of the day, Grayfen had drinkable water, stable food, and no idea who should do what. The population register listed 18 people as general laborers. That category included a reed cutter with hands like a mason, a mill worker who flinched whenever anyone raised a voice, an elderly midwife, 3 fishermen, 2 injured quarry workers, and a man who insisted his only useful skill was carrying heavy objects without asking why. The realm editor offered a solution. Aptitude routing current assignment loss, 73%, requirement, calibration arc function. Identifies strongest usable paths, does not compel acceptance. The arc required stone, bone, iron pins, and 31 units I did not have. I reclaimed points from ration variety, road width preference, and every remaining form of visual prestige. The grid warned that Meridian's ceremonial appearance would fall below regional expectations. I accepted the risk. We built the arch in front of the toll house from salvaged foundation blocks and polished Tusker bone. The residents did most of the work. I used construction sequence to arrange the tasks so the stonecutters were never waiting on the carpenters, and the carpenters were never waiting on iron pins. The interface did not make them faster. It stopped 6 people from standing beside a hole, while 1 person searched for the tool that should have arrived first. When the final crosspiece locked into place, gold lines ran through the dark stone. No one volunteered to enter. The arch stood twice my height, empty and silent. People gathered around it as though I had erected a mouth. What does it do? It reads aptitude and recommends work. Recommendations from whom? Lyra asked. The territory. That answer will not comfort anyone. It recommends, I repeated. It does not order. A woman in the crowd folded her arms. And if it says I am worthless? It does not measure worth. Lords always say that before measuring worth. Fair. Tessa shoved her slate into Bran's hands and stepped forward. Test me. Bran caught the board awkwardly. You do not have to. Yes, I do. If it kills me, burn the Lord's grain ledger before he can change the numbers. I would prefer you not establish that policy, I said. She walked through the arch. Gold light scanned from her boots to her copper curls. 3 paths unfolded above her head.
Logistics coordination, S. Fraud detection, S. Ration design, A.
The crowd stared. Tessa stared harder. The first S-grade aptitude discovered in my territory belonged to a woman whose previous supervisors had fired her for organizing jars too aggressively. She turned slowly toward me. Does this mean I control the stores? It means you are qualified. That was not my question. We will discuss authority after the tests. She accepted that with visible reluctance.
Defensive command. A training instruction. A casualty control. S.
His face did not change, but the hand holding Tessa's slate tightened. Lyra entered after him.
Hydrology. S. Terrain synchronization. S. Survey verification. A.
The arch lit her silver-white hair gold at the edges. For a moment, she looked less like a punished provincial worker and more like the kind of person kingdoms should have competed to employ. Her eyes stayed on me. "You knew?" she asked. "I suspected you were competent." "That is not the same." "No, this is more convenient." Residents began lining up. The anxious mill worker received exceptional shield timing and fine tool control. The elderly midwife had rare sanitation aptitude and a strong healing support path. A fisherman turned out to have high iron smelting potential, despite never having seen a forge. Then the reed cutter entered.
Masonry. A structural fitting. A reed harvest. C.
People cheered. We needed walls. A high-potential mason was exactly what the territory lacked. The man did not cheer. "I do not want to cut stone," he said. The crowd quieted. "Why?" I asked. "My father cut stone. Dust took his lungs. I work reeds." "The arch recommends a path. It does not own you." His gaze shifted to the core, then back to me. "I can refuse?" "Yes." "Even if the territory needs a mason?" "Yes." He stepped away from the arch and returned to the reed workers. That decision cost me more than a useful specialist. It also earned more confidence than every S-rank result combined. People who had been holding back joined the line. They understood that the arch might reveal an option, without turning the option into a chain. Bran studied the gold frame after the last test. "It is a recruitment officer made of stone," he said. "More accurate than most. At least this one reads." By evening, smaller crews did more useful work. Tessa reorganized the store. Lyra moved the grain shed after showing me flood marks under the plaster. Bran taught 8 volunteers to use shields without striking each other in the head. Moving the store cost half a day. Lyra noticed that I accepted the evidence without demanding gratitude. That night I called the 3 of them into the toll house. A repaired lamp hung over the table. The roof still leaked in one corner, so Tessa had placed a pot beneath it. There were only 4 stools. Bran took the floor without complaint. 2 days of food in each. Water skins. A small amount of territory coin. "The Eastern Road is open," I said. "The immediate food crisis is over. None of you owes me service for surviving it." Tessa looked at the packs. "You are dismissing us?" "I am giving you an exit before I ask you to stay." Lyra leaned back against the wall. "Why?" "Because I intend to build something large. People who remain because they were trapped become unreliable the moment the door opens." Bran's eyes sharpened. "And people who remain voluntarily?" "They become expensive. They negotiate." Tessa nodded. Now he understands administration. I looked at Lyra first. "You have a road out." "Why are you still here?" "Because every other lord asked me to make the map obey him," she said. "You asked me where the water actually goes." Her voice remained controlled, but one hand had closed around the strap of her map case. "Orvin's survey office ordered me to approve a canal diversion," she continued. "The new line put 3 villages below an unsafe bank. I refused. Another surveyor signed. The bank failed the next spring." No one joked. "How many?" I asked. 47 dead. More displaced. The office blamed the rain and sent me here for insubordination." She met my eyes. "I will stay if survey authority is mine. I can halt construction, roads, or troop movement when the ground is unsafe. I will not falsify a border. I will not hide a settlement because conquest would be easier without it." That was a significant limit on a man who wanted the map. "Accepted," I said, her shoulders loosened by a fraction. Bran went next without being asked. "My claim broke in another lord's war," he said. "He ordered my company to hold a causeway, while civilians were still trapped beyond it. I pulled back to evacuate them. The enemy crossed. My lord died." His dark eyes stayed on the table. "They called me coward, because the dead lord could not explain his own order. I will not command for another man who treats soldiers as numbers wearing armor." "Do you want soldiers?" he asked, looking up. "Or do you want numbers wearing armor?" "Soldiers." "Then give me written authority to halt training or an attack, if the cost is being hidden. No civilian bait. No children. No casualty assumptions you forget to mention." "Accepted." "If I stop you in front of the troops?" "I will answer in front of the troops." That one hurt more. I accepted it anyway. Tessa tapped one finger on the travel pack. "You finished the audit," I said. "Why not leave?" "Because you were angry that food vanished," she said. "Every other lord was angry that I wrote it down." She placed a small, copied ledger on the table. Page after page showed Orvin's fixed road losses, missing grain, and supervisor signatures. One set of books, she said. Not an officer ledger, a public ledger, and a third one hidden under both. No one removes stock without an entry, including you. In an emergency, take what you need and sign afterward. You intend to audit your lord? I intend to keep him fed long enough to become unbearable. Accepted. The territory core pulsed in the next room. 3 contract panels appeared. Lyra's survey veto, Brand's safety authority, Tessa's store control.
Authority gained. Voluntary compact stability. Permanent.
The gain was larger than the authority I had received for killing the Tusker. The grid gave more permanent authority for voluntary service than for fear. People who chose the compact would keep working when I was not standing over them. Youthful, also inconvenient for absolute rule. We need a name, Tessa said. Grafen works, Bram replied. Grafen is the parcel name, Lyra said. It was assigned by the same office that altered the maps. I looked at the survey lines spread across the table. One long north-south measurement cut through the region, connecting watermarks, roads, and boundary stones. Meridian, I said. For the territory? Bran asked. For the faction. Lyra's gaze narrowed. Faction implies more than one territory. Yes. You have one. For now. Tessa sighed. What comes after Meridian? Dominion, I said. Bran folded his arms. Tessa pointed at the food ledger. You currently rule 1 burned mill. I considered the room. 1 leaking roof, 4 stools, a pot catching rain. Compact, Lyra said. If these terms matter, call it what it is. The Meridian Compact. I liked the sound. A compact was an agreement. A meridian crossed the entire map. We ate together after signing. Tusker stew, coarse bread, and clean water. Bran took a portion large enough to create an immediate accounting dispute. Tessa reduced it by 1 ladle. Lyra unfolded a map beside her bowl. I sat in my newly repaired black coat, fitted high at the collar by one of the residents from cloth found in the toll house chest. Thin silver seams ran along the shoulders and cuffs. It was the first thing I owned in Astera that looked intentional. Outside, the mill turned without grinding itself apart. The well crew laughed as clean water filled the trough. Recruits finished evening stretches under Bran's supervision. The store key rested beside Tessa's bowl. 3 days earlier, Grafen had been waiting to die. Now it had food, work, terms, and 3 people authorized to tell me no. My empire had developed brakes before it had a road. Annoying. Probably necessary. The next bottleneck was stone. Food bought time. Time without defenses merely allowed an enemy to arrive after we had eaten properly. Grafen's old quarry lay 2 miles north, beyond a drowned track and a line of black willow trees. According to the territory record, it contained floodglass slate and iron sand. According to Lyra, the last cutting crew had lost control of it when burrowing monsters broke through the lower terraces. According to Tessa, Orvin still charged Grafen a material fee for a quarry nobody could enter. I was beginning to admire the completeness of his theft. Lyra and I surveyed the site in hard rain. Floodglass quarry descended in 5 broad terraces cut into dark stone. Black water filled the bottom 3. Narrow ramps connected each level. Cutting sheds leaned against the walls. Some collapsed, one still sealed. Pale ridges moved beneath the water whenever our lamps passed over it. Glassback burrowers, Lyra said. 30, perhaps 40. How do you know? Shell tracks, feeding marks, air holes, and the large gouges? Her amber eyes followed them to the central cut. Rain ran from her silver braid as we measured the drainage gates, marked stable ledges, and returned to the mill, soaked through. The loft had become our map room because it was the only place with a floor large enough to hold Lyra's sheets, and a roof that leaked mostly at the edges. She removed her wet coat and hung it from a beam. Practical linen and leather remained beneath, fitted close from the rain. I looked once, noticed more than was operationally necessary, and gave her my dry outer coat. You will need it, she said. I will be beside the fire. You intend to stand over the map for the next hour? I can be cold strategically. That is not a skill. It was too broad at the shoulders, and reached farther down her legs than her own. The silver seams caught the lamplight. We leaned over the quarry map together, our shoulders touching whenever she shifted a marker. She smelled faintly of rain, leather, and the sharp mineral powder she used on survey lines. The western ramp is the only approach wide enough for shields, I said. It is also fractured here. Her finger touched a pale mark. Too much weight and the lower section drops. We drained the first terrace, The burrowers leave the water, meet Bran on the ramp, and die in a narrow channel. What forces them to leave? Noise. We put civilians on the upper ledge with hammers. He climbed into the loft, favoring his right knee. Tessa followed with a slate, and the expression of someone arriving to stop us from spending things. Bran looked at the map. Untrained civilians do not become bait because the plan calls them noise. They would be above the channel. They would be close enough for the plan to use their fear. The room went quiet. He had negotiated the right to stop me. Now he was using it. Then we use suspended iron plates and rope, I said. 2 volunteers strike them from behind the shield line. Bran nodded once. Tessa set down her slate. You have 3 usable coils of rope, 12 wedges, 6 jars of lamp oil, and 21 shields. If anyone throws a shield away dramatically, I will retrieve it before I retrieve them. Your priorities are inspiring. My priorities are why we still have rope. We needed the quarry. The burrowers hid under black water, so we would drain one terrace and draw them onto the western ramp with noise. Bran's shields would hold the channel. Lyra controlled the gate, Tessa controlled the ropes and lamps, and I would order the retreat or release the lower water pocket. We entered the quarry at dawn, with 20 volunteers split between shields and rope teams, plus Lyra, Tessa, Bran, and me. The other 8 residents waited on the upper road with carts and medical cloth. The rain had stopped, but mist lay over the water. Bran formed his line halfway down the western ramp. Shields overlapped from stone wall to drop edge. They were plain boards faced with narrow bands of flood glass scrap. No crests, no paint. Every handle sat at the same height, because construction sequence had standardized them. An enemy scout would have called them cheap. An enemy scout would have been correct about the paint. Lyra crossed to the old drainage wheel. Tessa checked every rope knot personally. I stood behind Bran with a quarry hammer and 3 long cutting spikes. Open the first gate, I said. Lyra turned the wheel. Old chains screamed inside the wall. Water began pouring through a cracked channel toward the marsh. The first terrace dropped slowly, revealing stone shelves, broken tools, and curved glass shelves beneath the surface. The iron plates rang. Once, twice. The first burrower came over the lip like a blade rising from a grave. It was low, wide, and covered in translucent plates. 6 hooked legs struck the ramp. Its mouth opened sideways, then 5 more surfaced behind it. Hold, Bran said. The creatures rushed. The first impact drove the shield line back half a step. Claws scraped across flood glass facing. A hooked leg reached around one shield and opened a volunteer's cheek to the teeth. Blood ran down his neck, but he stayed in line. Push. The shields moved as one. Burrowers slipped on the wet stone. Spears punched between boards into pale joints. One creature reared, and I drove a cutting spike through the soft gap beneath its mouth. It jerked hard enough to tear the spike from my hands. More came from the water. Tessa called numbers from above us. 14 on the terrace, 7 moving left, 2 ropes remaining on the lower team. Not panic, information. Lyra released another section of gate. The water fell faster. Burrowers exposed by the draining terrace scrambled toward the only deep pool left, exactly as planned. Bran's line killed them as they crossed. For 6 minutes, the plan worked. Then the quarry wall moved. A ridge beneath the central ledge rose through the stone. Rock cracked. The entire lower section of the western ramp dropped 2 feet with a sound like a building breaking its back. 3 defenders fell. The shield line split. The broodmother erupted through the ledge. It was twice the size of the tusker, all glass armor and jointed legs. One mandible closed around his shield and crushed the wood inward. The defender behind it screamed as the rim broke his forearm. The second mandible drove through another recruit's thigh. It entered above the knee and came out behind him in a red point. His scream cut through every other sound. The broodmother lifted him from the ramp. Bran stepped into the gap. He caught the creature's head on his steel shoulder guard and jammed his shield beneath the impaled man's body to take the weight. His bad knee folded, bone struck stone. Line on me, he roared. The defenders closed around him. Our kill channel was gone. The lower ramp had collapsed. The broodmother blocked the center, and burrowers were climbing from both sides. Retreat would leave the impaled recruit and trap the people in the sealed cutting shed. I saw faces behind a narrow upper window now. Workers, more than 30 of them, pounding silently against the glass. Lyra grabbed my arm. There is a sealed water pocket behind the east wall. How much? Enough to sweep the central cut. Us with it? Yes. Can you direct it? Not precisely. The broodmother twisted. The recruit screamed again as the mandible tore wider through his leg. Do it. Lyra did not wait for a second order. She ran along the upper ledge, drove a brass survey spike into a hairline crack, and pressed both palms to the stone. Amber light spread from her hands. The wall groaned. "Ropes," Tessa shouted. "Everyone clip in." Workers hooked waistlines to iron pins. I wrapped one rope around my forearm and drove my boots against the ramp. A black sheet of water struck the quarry. It hit with enough force to remove breath and direction. Shields ripped sideways. Bodies slammed into stone. My rope cut into my arm as the surge lifted me off my feet. The broodmother rolled. For 1 second, its glass-plated back vanished beneath it. The underside was pale and soft. Bran saw it too. He anchored one arm around the impaled recruit, planted his good leg, and forced the creature's head down. Vale, I pulled myself along the rope, through waist-deep water. The broodmother's legs thrashed. One struck my ribs and knocked the air from me. I hit the ramp, tasted blood, and kept the cutting spike in both hands. The joint beneath its central plate opened as it twisted. I drove the spike in. The creature convulsed. Its mandible ripped free of the recruit's thigh with a wet tearing sound. Blood clouded the water around Bran. I put my shoulder behind the spike. Pain tore across the half-healed tusk wound. I pushed until the iron point struck stone beneath the creature. The broodmother shuddered once. Then its weight collapsed over me. For several seconds, I could not move. Glass armor pressed my chest into the flooded ramp. The smell beneath it was sour mud and old meat. Hands found the shell. Bran, Lyra, and 4 defenders rolled it aside. Air returned to my lungs in one ugly gasp. The remaining burrowers tried to reach the lower pool. Bran's line reformed around the broken ramp and killed them one at a time. No clean formation now. Men and women struck with shaking arms. Spears snapped. Shields split. Black blood mixed with red until the water looked like ink under sunset. When the last creature stopped moving, nobody cheered. Lyra lowered her hands from the broken wall. Only then did I see her fingers shaking from the strain. The injured recruit was still screaming. Lyra cut his trouser leg away. The mandible had missed the main artery by less than a finger's width. The midwife pressed cloth into the wound while 4 people held him down. 2 defenders had broken arms. 1 had lost 3 teeth. Bran's knee had swollen beneath his leather brace. The wounded still screamed. The quarry was the only thing their pain had bought. We opened the sealed cutting shed. 42 workers emerged. They were thin, filthy, and armed with quarry tools. To the site, and withdrawn the guards when the burrowers came. The workers had survived for 6 days on emergency meal and condensation from the walls. Their debt records still charged them for every day they had been trapped. I broke the site contract through the captured quarry marker. "You owe Meridian nothing for being rescued," I told them. "You may leave when the road is safe. If you remain, you receive food, shelter, and wages." An older cutter named Dove looked at the dead broodmother, then at Bran kneeling beside the wounded. "And the old debt?" he asked. "Belongs to Orvin." The contract marks on their wrists went dark. That was the first time anyone cheered. We brought the injured home first. The freed workers slept in repaired mill sheds and canvas. Lean-tos on ground. Lyra marked above the floodline. Tessa issued food by name and work status. No one was required to join the militia. Bran assigned quarry guards only from volunteers. Dove volunteered anyway. He said 6 days behind a locked shed door had cured him of waiting for Orvin's permission. By the 3rd morning, all 42 rescued workers had registered with Meridian. Some wanted quarry wages. Some wanted a guarded road. None wanted Orvin's contracts back. The grid awarded authority for the public work and the rescue. Resource grade sealing also unlocked at minimum function. Under correct cutting and washing, the quarry's dull slate revealed a hard blue-black inner layer. The iron sand was not poor. The old smelting process had simply burned half of it away. Again, the land had not been empty. It had been badly handled. We used the first stone to surface the training yard. Bran had 54 volunteers by the 3rd day. Some were quarry workers, some were Greyfen residents who had watched the rescue. Their plain shields matched. Their spear shafts were cut to 3 standard lengths. Damaged straps could be replaced from one pattern instead of rebuilt separately. I activated training conversion. At first it looked miraculous. Instructions that normally took days settled into bodies within hours. Footwork sharpened, shield timing aligned. The anxious former mill worker who used to flinch at raised voices became the cleanest gap defender in the yard. Recruits learned to rotate the line without opening their center. I increased the setting. They improved faster. I increased it again. By afternoon, Bran's volunteers moved like soldiers who had trained for months. Then, one collapsed. A woman stepped backward during rotation. Her calf seized and she hit the stone. Another recruit could not close his hand around a spear. Two more had swelling along the tendons above their ankles. "Stop," Bran shouted. The yard froze. "We have 3 hours left in the cycle," I said. "We have 4 damaged recruits. The interface shows no skill instability." "I am not talking about skill." He walked to the center of the yard and faced me in front of everyone. "Their minds learned faster than their flesh adapted. Training ends now." The lost hours appeared in my head immediately. Orvin had received word about the quarry. Our protection had less than 2 days remaining. Every delay narrowed the margin. The muscle beneath her skin jumped uncontrollably. The others stood perfectly in formation, while breathing like hunted animals. I had optimized instruction and ignored recovery. The setting produced faster results. It was also tearing apart the people I needed to defend the territory. "Training ends," I said. "Tessa, increase protein and salt. Lyra, convert the old wash shed into recovery space. Bran, set the cycle limit. I will lower conversion until you approve it." Bran held my gaze for another second. Then he turned to the recruits. "You heard the Lord. Sit down before competence removes your ability to walk." I opened the editor and searched every menu. There was a learn faster setting. There was no knees are optional setting. Civic recovery, nutrition, and stage loading became part of the training template. That evening, Bran came to the toll house with his red sash folded over one arm. "You honored the halt," he said. "I signed the authority. Men sign many things when the room is warm." He tied the sash over his steel shoulder guard. "I will take captaincy, if the offer remains." "It remains." He clasped my forearm. The Meridian Compact had an army. More importantly, it had a captain willing to stop me before I trained my own army into the infirmary. Orvin's collectors arrived the following morning. 6 mounted men stopped outside the calibration arch, wearing blue coats, polished breastplates, and the relaxed expressions of people who had never needed permission to enter Grafen. Their leader produced a crystal contract. "Lord Orvin Malk extends protection to Meridian," he announced. 70% territorial tithe, water administration rights, road supervision, and permanent garrison access. In return, your residents will be protected from monsters and unlawful aggression. Behind him, 2 of his men looked at our plain shields and unpainted spear racks with open amusement. They saw poverty. They did not see that every shield used the same straps, every spear fit the same wall bracket, and every damaged piece could be repaired from one pattern. "What protection have you provided so far?" I asked. The collector frowned. "The contract grants future protection." "So the previous grain disappeared under a separate service?" Tessa stepped out of the storehouse carrying her copied ledgers. 17% road loss, she said. "Every month. Same number in rain, frost, and drought." Orvin charged Grafen for guarding grain his own way stations removed. The lead collector's gaze hardened. "Tessa Rook. Lord Orvin offers amnesty if you return the stolen records and submit for questioning." "They are copies," she said. "You still have the stolen originals." One of the riders dismounted and reached for her.
Unauthorized arrest attempt. No valid warrant. Core law denies custody transfer.
His hand stopped inches from Tessa's arm, as though the air had become stone. He drew a knife with the other hand. Bran caught his wrist, turned it, and drove him face first into the calibration arch. 2 teeth struck the stone and dropped at his boots. The lead collector raised his contract. "Assaulting an officer of Drybank is cause for seizure. Attempting an unlawful arrest inside a protected core is cause for disarmament," I said. "Your man may keep the teeth if Tessa records the withdrawal." Tessa opened her ledger. "Dental loss. 2 units. Cause, poor judgment." Lyra stepped beside me. "Tell Orvin we know the public canal charter still exists." The collector's face changed. Orvin was not merely charging too much for water. He had diverted a public channel into his private reservoir and relied on the original charter remaining buried. I gave the collector my answer. "Open the canal gate and cancel the false protection claim. If he refuses, I challenge Drybank's right to hold the waterworks." "You have 54 farmers with boards. I have 54 defenders with standardized boards." He looked at the arch, the repaired mill, and the quarry carts rolling through the gate. His confidence returned slowly, as if he had decided visible progress was still too small to matter. "Drybank will collect this territory tomorrow." They rode east. Bran watched them go. "We can hold Meridian." "For one attack," I said. "And after?" "Orvin closes the water. He sends another force. Then another. We spend every week defending the same shortage." Drybank controlled our water. As long as Orvin held the gate, he could keep sending soldiers and shortages until Meridian broke. Repelling one levy would change nothing. We had to take the outpost. A locked line in the realm editor pulsed when I thought it.
Template propagation requirement. First, legal conquest.
I had expected expansion eventually. Eventually had just become tomorrow. Lyra opened her map case and removed a waxed tube I had never seen. Inside lay a parchment bearing 3 old seals and a blue metallic thread through the edge. The original canal charter, she said. Publishing it would prove Orvin's diversion. It would also prove she had concealed crown property after her dismissal. You do not have to use it, I said. If we do not, he calls this theft. It will end any path back to provincial service. That path ended under 47 bodies. She placed the charter in my hand. I am choosing where I stand. We prepared through the night. Drybank Outpost stood east of Meridian, beyond a raised stone bridge over the half-dry canal. The bridge was narrow enough for 6 shields. Reed flats spread south toward our civilian huts. An old spillway lay north, clogged but functional. Drybank's core sat inside a square gatehouse beyond the far end of the bridge. Bran placed 36 defenders at the western choke and kept 18 with me as reserve. Engineers built flat caltrop boards sized to the reed paths. Lyra took 6 workers to the spillway. Scouts watched the southern flats from the survey tower. Tessa controlled arrows, food, and the infirmary. She also cut my ration and Bran's before touching the civilian issue. You could have told me, I said. You gave me store authority. I did. You looked busy. That was the full discussion. Meridian's 7-day protection expired shortly before dawn. The monster surge began less than an hour later. Howls moved through the reeds. Dark shapes crossed the marsh in groups. Long-backed marsh hounds, 2 smaller tuskers, and pale things that crawled with too many elbows. The territory alarm counted more than 300 hostile creatures converging through the basin. Then Drybank's levy appeared on the eastern road. Monsters in front, Orvin soldiers behind them, civilians between both threats. We had to keep our people alive and take the waterworks before Orvin could repeat the attack. 180 infantry formed beyond the bridge. 30 mounted enforcers separated from the column and entered the southern reeds, exactly where Lyra predicted. They intended to pin Bran at the bridge and ride around into the civilian quarter. Orvin had chosen the monster surge because he expected us to be too busy surviving to contest the seizure. I touched Meridian's core through the claim interface and raised Lyra's charter. Dominion grid, I said. I challenged Drybank Outpost for unlawful control of a public water channel. Evidence attached. The charter dissolved into blue light. For one terrible second, nothing happened. Then every territory panel in the basin flashed. Public water charter verified. Drybank violation confirmed. Recognized territorial challenge available. Victor may claim Waterworks Core. Across the bridge, the Drybank captain received the same notice. He could have withdrawn and requested arbitration. Instead, a message crystal flared in his hand. Orvin's face appeared for only a moment. I could not hear the words, but I saw the captain's spine stiffen. He raised his sword. Advance. Bran waited until they passed the center marker. Shields. The levy struck them with spears and axes. Wood cracked, boots slid. The first impact drove our line back 1 pace, then stopped. Drybank's captain had expected cheap equipment and frightened residents. Instead, every shield edge met the next at the same angle. Every replacement strap fit every arm. His soldiers pushed harder. Bran rotated the front rank before exhaustion broke it. The movement was clean. The second line stepped in. The first withdrew through gaps and reformed behind them. Training conversion had not given them stronger bodies. It had taught 54 people how to use the bodies they had without wasting motion. Arrows crossed above the shields. Tessa issued them in bundles of 12. Archers fired at marked targets only. No heroic rain, no empty quivers after 3 minutes. The first Drybank soldier fell with an arrow through his throat. The man behind him climbed over the body. A spear punched through one of our shields and entered a defender's shoulder. He screamed, but the line closed around him as casualty runners dragged him back. Then the monsters hit both formations. A marsh hound came over the bridge rail beside Harl. He drove his spear into its chest, but a second hound caught him behind the knee and pulled. His head struck the stone. The shield line could not open without collapsing, and the creatures dragged him beneath the rail before the runners could reach him. There was no time to stop. More hounds burst into Drybank's rear ranks. Marsh hounds burst from beneath the bridge and tore into the levy's rear. Orders collided. The captain forced them forward anyway, using the bridge as a funnel toward us while his back ranks fought the surge. Bodies began to pile between the two shield walls. "Push over them," he shouted. His front rank obeyed. A drybank axe hooked the top of one shield and tore downward. The defender behind it tried to hold the rim. The blade took 3 of his fingers. They landed in the mud at his feet. He stared once, made a sound too small for the wound, and collapsed behind the line. Bran stepped into his place. Hold! The bridge became 6 yards of splintered wood, iron, and blood. Spears entered bodies at arm's length. Men slipped on people they had known. Breath came in grunts because there was no room for full lungs. A scout horn sounded from the south. 3 short notes. Cavalry in the reed flats. I looked toward Lyra's spillway position. Our plan had been to let the riders reach the caltrop boards, close the path behind them with water, then trap the entire unit against the canal. The scouts signaled again. The cavalry had changed direction. They were not aiming for our reserve. They were riding straight toward the civilian huts. Children and injured quarry workers were sheltering there because the mill infirmary could not hold everyone. I reached for the signal flag. The spillway opened before I raised it. Lyra had seen the same thing. Water thundered through the northern gate. The half-dry canal filled in seconds, overflowed the southern bank, and raced across the reed flats. Horses screamed as mud became current beneath them. The front riders struck our caltrop boards. Iron points punched through hooves. Animals fell, throwing armored men into brown water. The flood reached the civilian quarters' outer embankment and diverted around the huts. It also tore through every seed plot we had planted beside the canal. Our planned encirclement vanished with the crop. The cavalry was isolated, but the bridge approach on their side remained open. We could no longer trap the full levy. Lyra had saved the civilians and ruined my cleanest victory. She had made the correct decision. I raised the reserve flag. "New plan," I said. "We break the bridge line and take the core before the cavalry regroups. Engineers, plank the damaged section. Reserve with me." His face was gray with effort. His damaged knee shook beneath him. 3 rotations, he called. Then I push. He did not ask permission. Tessa's runners brought fresh shields. The anxious former mill worker took the front position beside Bran. Months of fear had not disappeared. He was terrified now. His hands shook until the shield touched the line. Then his timing became exact. The first enemy spear struck. He turned it aside and opened a gap for Bran's counterthrust. 1 rotation. 2. On the 3rd, Bran drove forward. Our shield wall hit the levee like a closing gate. The reserve entered behind it in 2 files. Engineers dropped standardized plank sections over the broken bridge edge. The pieces locked because every pin and notch had been cut to 1 measure. A marshhound leaped from beneath the rail. I caught it on my shield. Its jaws closed over the rim, teeth punching through wood. I drove my short sword under its ribs and felt the blades scrape bone. The animal's weight dragged me to 1 knee. A reserve spearman finished it and pulled me up. Ahead, Bran's knee finally failed. He dropped hard. The line bent around him. The former mill worker stepped into his place without being ordered. Then another defender covered Bran's retreat. The line held because another trained defender stepped in whenever someone fell. We were no longer depending on one hero to hold everything. We reached the far gate. Drybank's captain had withdrawn with 20 soldiers to defend the core. He wore polished blue plate and carried a curved saber. Behind him, civilians crowded against the outpost walls, expecting whichever side won to loot them. "Yield the core," I said. "The water violation is confirmed. Your soldiers receive safe conduct if they drop weapons." The captain looked past me at Bran being carried from the bridge and at the blood covering our plain armor. "You are a preference lord with peasants." "Yes." His face tightened. Losing to me offended him more than the dying around us. He ordered the charge. The gate fight lasted less than 2 minutes and felt longer than the entire bridge. There was no formation inside the narrow yard. Men struck at faces, knees, and hands. Dove shoved a younger defender out of a spear's path and took the point through his own stomach. He folded around the shaft without a sound. Nessa cracked an attacker's knee with the rim of her shield. His axe came down as he fell. The blade entered the side of her neck before the next defender pinned him against the wall. The captain came for me. His saber was faster than I expected. The first cut opened my coat along the ribs. The second cut followed through the same line and entered flesh. Heat spread down my side. I stepped inside his third swing and struck his sword arm with my shield. Bone cracked at the wrist, but he kept hold of the weapon. He slammed his forehead into my face. Light burst behind my eyes. We hit the ground together. He was heavier. His broken wrist trapped between us, saber still moving in short, desperate cuts. One sliced my hip. I caught his forearm with both hands. He tried to bite my throat. There are elegant duels in songs. This was two exhausted men in blood and mud, trying to make the other stop breathing. My hand found a broken spear beneath the body. I drove the jagged shaft under his breastplate. It entered below the ribs. His breath stopped with a wet click. He looked down, then back at me, still trying to lift the saber. I pushed once more. The point reached his heart. His weight settled across my legs. I rolled him aside and forced myself upright. The core was 20 paces away. If I stayed in the mud, his death changed nothing. The remaining Drybank soldiers saw their captain dead. "Drop them," I said. This time they did. Drybank's core floated above a stone basin, blue light bound in chains of gold contract script. I put my blood-covered hand against it. Claim. The chains broke. For 1 second, the world became silent. Then, the grid answered.
Drybank outpost conquered. Legal claim recognized. Template propagation unlocked.
Gold lines flowed from my hand into the core. They spread through the gatehouse floor, crossed the bridge, entered the canal stones, and ran beneath every store, well and road in both territories. The realm editor opened by itself.
Global Meridian template available. Select active parameters.
Loss rate, aptitude routing, construction sequence, civic recovery. I selected the safe standards we had already tested. The result moved through Drybank like sunrise under the ground. Nothing appeared from nowhere. The territories simply began honoring the work people had already done. A leaking canal joint stabilized where workers had packed it with clay, but lacked pressure control. Storehouse measures flashed red when their carved marks failed the core standard. Inventory lines appeared over doors and bins. One false wall in Orvin's levy store registered as inaccessible stock. Tessa arrived 20 minutes later, opened it, and found grain stacked 3 rows deep. Not created grain, hidden grain, enough to feed both territories through the next month. Repair crews passed voluntarily through a temporary aptitude scan and reorganized within the hour. Men who had spent years hauling sacks were identified as pump mechanics. A dismissed cook had exceptional sanitation aptitude. Drybank's own clerk produced a private ledger showing how much Orvin's officers had removed. The outpost did not become rich because I conquered it. It stopped bleeding because my rules crossed the border. I had expected improvement. I had not expected the entire territory to feel as though someone had tightened every loose bolt at once. Brand disarmed the surrendered soldiers and put them on casualty and barrier duty under guard. Our remaining defenders killed the last hounds near the canal. By mid-morning, the surviving monsters had fled back into the reeds. We opened the canal gate fully before noon. Clean water entered Meridian's branch for the first time in years. Drybank's 107 civilians gathered in the square, while our defenders stood around them. Several clutched tools as weapons. Others held children. They expected confiscation, forced labor, or punishment for feeding Orvin's levy. I climbed the gatehouse steps, with my ribs bound temporarily under the torn black coat. Orvin's weapons and official stores belonged to the Meridian Compact. I said, "Your homes, tools, and personal stock remain yours. Anyone who wants to leave may do so after the monster surge, with 2 days of food. Anyone who stays receives access to the public ledger, open water, and the right to refuse aptitude recommendations." A woman near the front raised her voice. "What is the tax?" "Tessa," she looked down at her slate. "Current emergency contribution is 12% grain, or equivalent labor. It falls when stores stabilize. Officers eat after civilians." The woman looked at me. "Even you?" Tessa has already tested that rule. A few people laughed. The sound was thin, but it was real. Every family stayed for the night. Most had already chosen to remain. By evening, after the 3 deaths were removed from the register, the Meridian Compact held 2 recognized territories and 178 residents. We also held 1 usable cooking pot, large enough for the founder's meal. Tessa informed me of both facts in the same tone. The victory cost 3 defenders. Nessa had sealed the first grain jars in the mill. Dov had walked out of the quarry shed and chosen to fight beside the people who freed him. Harl had been the man laughing when the repaired well flooded my boots. We buried them on the dry ridge above the canal. 8 others carried serious wounds. 1 man had lost fingers. Bran could barely stand. The seed plots Lyra flooded were gone. No one discussed efficiency at the graves. That night, after the dead were covered and the wounded had stopped screaming, the 4 of us ate in the damaged outpost hall. Bran sat with his leg raised. Tessa wrote between bites. Lyra had changed into a dry shirt, but her silver braid was still damp from the spillway. "You opened early," I said. "Yes. It cost the seed plots and the encirclement." "Yes. It saved the civilian quarter." Her amber eyes held mine. "Yes. You made the correct decision." Something in her face eased. Later she found me alone, beside the conquered core. My temporary bandage had soaked through. She closed the door, set down her field case, and told me to remove the coat. I did. Her fingers cleaned the cut along my ribs with slow, controlled pressure. The room was quiet except for the canal outside. When the cloth passed over the deepest part, my stomach tightened. "You can swear," she said. "I am still budgeting. This territory appears richer than your breath." Her braid slid over my bare shoulder as she leaned closer. Warmth moved with her hand. She smelled of clean rain now, instead of marsh water. The dry bank core pulsed. Gold lines spread across the floor again. I caught her wrist without thinking. She stopped. Neither of us moved away. "What will this power make you?" she asked. I looked through the open window, at 2 territories connected by water and 1 shared standard. "A ruler no one can overrule," I said. Her expression did not soften. "That can become another name for Orvin." "I know. Do you?" "I intend to own enough of the map that men like him never decide whether my people drink. I also intend to keep the terms I signed." Her thumb rested against the inside of my wrist. "Those intentions will fight each other. Then stay close enough to tell me when the wrong one is winning." She held my gaze for a long moment. Then she finished binding my ribs. The core flashed white. A new window opened above it without my command.
Crown Audit Channel. Remote contact.
A narrow-faced woman appeared in the light, with pale violet eyes, straight black hair, and an immaculate graphite robe. A white half-mask covered one side of her face. One vertical gold line ran from brow to cheek. She looked past me at the propagated template readings. For the first time since the window opened, her calm expression broke. That setting was supposed to be dead. The channel vanished. Lyra and I stood in silence beside the captured core. Someone else knew what the realm editor was. Someone powerful enough to watch a legal conquest from far beyond Grayfen. I should have been afraid. I was. But fear did not change the opportunity. I looked at the gold lines connecting Meridian and Drybank, and understood what every future victory could do. The settings spreading to conquered land had been the accident. The empire I intended to build from them was not. The first spear hit the wagon driver before I finished wondering why our replacement wheel did not fit. He folded over the bench with the shaft through his upper arm. The mules screamed. A second spear struck the road beside my boot, and 6 riders burst from the reeds wearing no colors at all. 6 weeks after conquering Drybank, I had apparently built an empire that could survive a monster wave, but still be defeated by an axle. "Down!" Bran roared. The road crew dropped behind the wagon. I drew my short sword and moved to the left wheel, where the cart had sagged into the mud. Drybank made axle pins a finger thicker than Meridian. Our spare wheel was perfect. Perfectly useless. One rider came straight at me. I waited until his horse committed to the narrow strip between the ditch and the wagon, then stepped inside the spear point. The shaft scraped my shoulder plate. I caught it under my left arm, pulled, and let the rider's own speed drag him sideways. He hit the road face first. Bran's shield landed on the second rider, with enough force to remove all interest in mounted warfare. "3 right," he shouted. I saw them. 2 circled toward the workers. The third stayed back with a short bow. Workers behind the stone marker. Driver with them. Our road crew moved without arguing. That part mattered. 6 weeks ago, half of Grayfen froze when someone drew steel. Now, the nearest mason cut the spear from the driver's arm, so the shaft would not catch. Another man tied pressure cloth above the wound. And the rest pulled him behind cover. Training did not make everyone a warrior. It did make panic less productive. The archer loosed. Bran turned his shield. The arrow struck iron and snapped. I went low around the wagon while he held their attention. One rider saw me late and tried to turn. His horse had nowhere to go. I drove my blade into the rider's thigh above the knee. He screamed, fell, and the horse ran riderless into the reeds. The last 2 broke. Bran did not chase. Neither did I. They had come to burn supplies, not die for them, and I cared more about why they knew our route. The driver was pale but conscious. The raider I had pulled from his horse was not. His neck had bent at an angle that removed the need for interrogation. The man with the ruined thigh was more cooperative after Tessa's escort arrived and informed him that the alternative to answering questions was continuing to bleed on a road that had not been cleaned recently. He was not Darien's soldier. Technically, he had been paid in Darien-minted trade bars by a broker who wanted Meridian wagons delayed. The timing was obvious. Drybank's first full grain shipment was supposed to reach Meridian before dusk. Someone wanted our two territories to feel the distance between them. They had nearly succeeded, because the wagon itself had been built in Drybank. I looked at the useless spare wheel again. Bran looked with me. Enemy weapon? I asked. Axle. I disliked that answer. We got the wagon moving by cutting a new pin from green hardwood and wrapping it in rawhide. It took 2 hours. The repair would last one trip. The next morning, I gathered the Drybank storekeepers, Meridian Smiths, Teamsters, and our 3 founders in the old outpost hall. I had prepared a speech. It was a good speech. It contained the words, regional strength. Tessa raised one hand before I reached them. We need a second cooking pot. I stared at her. There are 178 people across 2 territories, I said. Yes. I am discussing regional sovereignty. And 51 of those people ate stew after the night watch yesterday. The kitchen has 1 pot. Sovereignty is waiting for breakfast. Bran folded his arms. Lyra looked down at her map, which meant she was hiding a smile badly. I changed the agenda. The problem was larger than 1 pot. Drybank weighed grain by riverstone baskets. Meridian used marked jars. Drybank's cart ruts were wider. Our spear sockets were narrower. Their roof pegs did not fit our drills. Even the nails were cut in 2 common lengths that were almost, but not quite, the same. Conquest had connected the cores. It had not connected the tools. The Realm editor could propagate efficiency settings cheaply now that template propagation was active, but it could not make a Drybank wheel fit a Meridian axle, because some dead carpenter had preferred a wider wagon 20 years ago. So we chose standards, 1 grain measure, 3 wheel sizes, 1 axle pin family, 2 spear shaft diameters, 1 set of forge gauges, 1 repair mark stamped into every interchangeable part. The room objected loudly. A Drybank wagon builder stood up and told me his father's wheel pattern had crossed the basin for 40 years. A Meridian Smith told him that was impressive, because apparently none had ever needed to turn around. I stopped that argument before Ancestry entered it. We are not banning local craft, I said. Build decorative carts with triangular wheels if someone pays you. Military, grain, and emergency transport use shared parts. If a wagon breaks in rain, I want the nearest depot to repair it, without asking where it was born. That landed better. Tessa received authority over a shared stores board. Local storekeepers kept their own work rules, but quantities and withdrawals used 1 measure. Lyra kept local building exceptions where ground or water made the standard unsafe. Bran standardized military fittings.
Global template. Logistics compatibility. Physical requirements detected. Measurement confidence. Acceptable authority cost. 31.
I approved it. Gold lines ran across the floor map from Meridian to Drybank. Nothing exploded. No divine army appeared. Tessa's new cooking pot did arrive before lunch. 3 weeks later, a Drybank grain cart broke a wheel outside Meridian. The driver walked to the road depot, returned with a replacement built by a different town, slid it onto the axle, inserted the standard pin, and left in 11 minutes. I watched the cart disappear north. That was the moment I became nervous. Not because it failed, because something as boring as agreeing on a pin had just removed 2 hours from every future military repair. And I had an entire map full of things that did not fit together yet. Darian Quell understood power well enough to notice me. His territory lay east of the basin, on iron-rich ground, and his war foundry talent had matured exactly as everyone expected. He could produce exceptional armor quickly. His cavalry wore white plate with red ridges, polished bright enough that scouts could see them from hills 2 miles away. His propaganda portraits were worse. In one, Darian sat on a black charger beneath 6 banners, while sparks rose behind him from 3 forges.
Tessa placed the portrait on our table beside a sheet of numbers.
He bought the coal. I looked at her. All of it? 72% this month. Imported, ore 2. Lyra leaned over the ledger. His own territory has iron. Good iron, poor coking coal. His foundry accelerates production. It does not make fuel. Tessa tapped 3 figures. He owes 2 merchant houses. He paid cavalry retainers early to make the last public muster look strong. His feed contracts are also above market. I pointed at one note in the margin. Your source? Her expression changed. My younger brother works the lower warehouses in Tithefort. Or worked. He sent me copied tallies when Orvin started hiding emergency grain. His letter stopped 3 weeks ago. Why did you not tell me? Because I did not know whether silence meant prison, fear, or a new mail inspector. I had no useful action for you yet. That was Tessa. Anxiety did not become a task until she could put a number beside it. Bran studied Darian's portrait. He has good soldiers. I know, do not let the numbers make you forget that. Darian was not a fraud. That would have been easier. His talent was strong. His officers were competent. His cavalry could cross open land faster than anything Meridian fielded. But he was building strength by consuming resources faster than he could replace them. I was building strength by making the same sack of grain, ingot of iron, and hour of labor go farther every month. His army looked richer. Mine was becoming cheaper to keep alive. The difference would matter after the first week of war. I pushed Darian's portrait aside and spread Lyra's basin map over the table. 3 small territories sat between Meridian and the eastern roads. Orvin had begun increasing their water fees. Darian's recruiters had visited too. "We are taking the basin," I said. Bran's eyes lifted from the map. Lyra did not look surprised. "Define taking," she said. "Every major road, canal branch, and defensible crossing answers to the Meridian Compact. Orvin loses Tithefort. Darian loses the ability to surround us. Independent territories can join on terms or remain neutral if neutrality does not become an enemy supply route." Bran scratched his jaw. "And Darian?" "Not this month. Eventually, yes." There was no point pretending otherwise. I wanted the map. The more I learned about the realm editor, the less interested I became in asking permission from men who had spent generations monetizing broken roads. Lyra's amber eyes stayed on me. "You said people could choose." "They can. You also just described which choices you will tolerate." "I described military neutrality." "You described it very confidently." "That is how I describe most things." "No, it was not." I looked at each founder. "The terms you signed in Grayfen still stand. Tessa controls public stores and records. Bran can stop training or assaults when I hide physical cost. Lyra can stop expansion on unsafe or falsified ground. I'm not asking you to surrender those limits, because I have 2 territories now." Bran nodded once. Tessa asked, "Will conquering the basin increase food requirements?" "Yes." "Then I remain opposed on principle." "You are staying?" "I did not say I was leaving. I said ambition eats." Bran's mouth moved very slightly. Lyra finally sat back. "I am staying," she said. "Not because I think you should own everything. I know. I am staying because I want the maps right before you reach them." The first 3 neighboring lords arrived over the next 12 days. They did not arrive to kneel. They arrived because Orvin had doubled water fees. Darian's brokers had started buying grain contracts, and Meridian wagons were somehow passing through the same roads with less spoilage and fewer breakdowns. Reed Bank came first. 214 residents, good black soil, weak canal pressure, and a lord young enough to look offended that survival required negotiation. Stonefield brought 167 people, timber and rough stone, but almost no trained defenders. Copperwash held 196 residents, and a shallow ore wash whose previous owner had called it exhausted. I met their representatives in Drybanks Hall because it was neutral enough to feel less like an annexation chamber. "Trade partnership, you remain fully independent and buy access to our standards and roads." I raised a second finger. "Defensive compact, shared warning, military access during declared attack, local laws remain local. Third, full territorial integration. Your core links to Meridian. Global templates apply, with local exceptions approved through your own managers. You receive compact protection and voting representation on local civil rules. I receive strategic authority over war, inter-territory roads, and system settings." The Reed Bank lords stared at me. "And if we choose none?" "You leave after lunch. Orvin will punish us." "Yes." "You will not protect us?" "Not for free." Lyra's head turned slightly toward me. I continued before she could use that look. "Free protection becomes ownership with worse accounting. If you want military defense, we need written obligations on both sides." That answer did not make them happy. It did make the room quieter. Stonefield's representative asked the question everyone actually cared about. "Will you assign our people jobs?" "No. The calibration arc identifies aptitudes. Recommendations are offers. Your people can refuse." "And taxes?" Tessa opened a ledger. Published. Same measure on both sides. Emergency levy requires a recorded reason. No hidden transport percentage. Copperwash's older representative looked at Lyra. "Borders?" "Surveyed before integration," Lyra said. "Existing household plots remain unless the owner agrees to exchange. No hidden civilian settlements. No map correction after Cassian sees an inconvenient hill." "I have never been defeated by a hill." "You lost a boot to one last week." "Mud was not a hill, but I let it go." Reedbank chose full integration after 2 days of debate. Stonefield chose the defensive compact first. Then, integration, after its residents voted. Copperwash selected a defensive compact and refused core linkage for another week. I accepted all 3 decisions. That part mattered to Lyra. It also turned out to matter to the grid. When Copperwash finally linked voluntarily, the linked population reached 755. The core network lit like dawn. Gold lines raced from Meridian through Drybank and across all 3 new borders. My hidden panel opened so fast, I thought something had broken. Permanent authority threshold reached. Domain architect unlocked. Global template slots expanded. Linked logistics active. Cross-territory aptitude routing active. Local override protocol dormant. I read it twice.
Network loss estimate 4.8%.
5 territories. 755 people. Less total avoidable loss than Grafen once managed inside 1 mil. I had expected expansion to make the system harder to control. Instead, the realm editor had apparently been waiting for me to stop thinking like a village lord. I looked at the gold network spreading over Lyra's map. "Oh," I said. Tessa glanced up. "That tone is expensive." She was correct. Domain Architect did not give me a throne, it gave me scheduling privileges. Naturally, those were much more dangerous. Cross-territory aptitude routing meant every linked calibration arch could compare a person's strengths against needs across the entire compact. A mason in Reedbank could receive an offer from Stonefield. A copperwash smelter with unusually good balance could be recommended for shield training. A Drybank farmer with no interest in farming could discover that he had the spatial memory of a surveyor. The arch recommended paths. It did not command anyone to take them. People still chose their own work. For the first week, the result looked manageable. Then Bran processed the military volunteers. He found 19 people with command aptitude high enough that his old company would have fought over them. He came into my office carrying the list like it had insulted him. 19. I can count. My old lord had 4 reliable lieutenants in 8 years. You appear to have improved at recruiting. I stood beside an arch, efficiently. Bran put the list on my desk. One former ferryman had exceptional formation timing because he had spent 20 years reading currents and spacing boats. A woman who repaired fishing nets could see weak points in linked patterns almost instantly and tested high for engineering. The former ferryman was Tomas Hall, a quiet man with a crooked nose whose sense of spacing made Bran promote him into a shield lieutenant within a month. 3 brothers who had failed repeatedly as ore washers showed nearly perfect distance judgment with crossbows. The funniest part was that none of them became competent because I clicked a button. The arch only stopped us from wasting them. Bran trained them in cycles. Work, rest, food, repeat. No tendon damage, no compressed stupidity. The training conversion setting made correct instruction stick faster. But muscles still had to grow, and bruises still had to heal. The force kept growing because the new officers could train people without waiting for Bran to supervise every drill. They were not legendary warriors. They were something more useful to a territory that intended to survive wars. Professionals who could replace one another. If one shield captain fell, another knew the rotation. If one engineer died, 5 others could read the bridge marks. If one depot burned, the next depot used the same labels. Heroes were impressive. Systems survived funerals. The civilian side became equally ridiculous. Copperwash's exhausted ore field had not been exhausted. It had been processed badly. Resource-grade sealing did not create metal. It simply stopped workers from throwing useful fine ore into tailings because their old screens were too wide. Output nearly tripled after new mesh frames went in. Stonefield's saw crews changed cutting sequence and produced more usable beams from the same trees. Reedbank reduced grain damage during threshing. Meridian's forge started sending gauge sets to every linked workshop. The merchants hated the standards until they discovered that a cart built in one territory could be repaired in another without waiting 3 days for a local carpenter. Then they began charging extra for Meridian-compatible equipment. I considered taxing the phrase. Tessa considered taxing me for considering it. The network needed observation towers next. Lyra designed them. Simple stone lower floors, timber platforms, rain gutters, signal arms, and 1 dry sleeping shelf for 2 watchers. The first tower on the northern ridge finished before the end of month 3, during a week of hard rain. Lyra and I went up to test sightlines. So did we. At midnight, the temperature dropped, and water began entering beneath the eastern shutter. The tower had 1 dry sleeping platform. It was wide enough for 2 adults if both adults agreed not to possess shoulders. Lyra looked at it. I looked at it. "There is floor," I said. "There is water on the floor." "I have slept in worse." "You have complained in worse." That was true. We lay on the platform fully clothed, backs almost touching. My black field coat had dried near the brazier. Lyra wore a fitted undershirt beneath her open teal coat, and her silver braid was loose because the rain had soaked it twice. The tower was too narrow to ignore another person's warmth. I concentrated on the map pinned above us. Very professionally, her heel touched my ankle. "You are tense," she said into the dark. The ridge remains unsecured. The ridge is empty for 6 miles. Then I am preemptively tense. She turned enough that her shoulder touched mine. Cassian, yes? You are allowed to be tired. I scheduled tired for tomorrow. That is not how bodies work. I have a setting that strongly disagrees. You also have scars proving the setting loses arguments. I smiled into the darkness. The rain softened. For a while neither of us spoke. I could hear her breathing, and the occasional click of cooling brass tools. There were 755 people below that ridge whose roads, stores, and defenses now depended partly on decisions I made in rooms they would never enter. It made me feel powerful. I liked that feeling more than I trusted myself to admit. Lyra's hand rested between us, palm down on the blanket. Mine ended beside it. Our fingers did not touch. The distance was smaller than one of Tessa's approved grain measures. I slept anyway. 2 weeks later, someone tried to kill us in the same tower. The first warning was silence. The signal watch should have called the noon mark. It did not. Lyra and I were halfway up the spiral stairs when my realm editor flickered.
Global setting interruption. Local node, North Survey Tower. Duration unknown.
Then the watchman came down the stairs backward. Dead. His throat had been cut so deeply that his head moved separately from his shoulders when the body hit the wall. Lyra stopped below me. Audit access, she whispered. I drew my sword. 3 people moved above. The first dropped a glass sphere down the stairwell. Down. Lyra pulled me behind the inner stone curve as the sphere burst. White shards filled the stairs. They did not fall normally. They hung for a heartbeat, then snapped toward the gold measurement marks carved into the tower walls. Audit glass. Every marked surface cracked at once. The stair beneath my boot split. I jumped the gap as the first killer came down with a hooked blade. He expected the tower's stability setting to protect the geometry. It was suspended. He did not expect the steps to have been built by Stonefield masons with physical locking joints, because Lyra never trusted one invisible setting with a structure people slept inside. The stair sagged. It did not collapse. That bought me half a second. I parried the hook, stepped close, and drove my forehead into the killer's nose. Bone broke. He stumbled. I cut across the inside of his sword arm, then shoved him into the damaged railing. The railing gave. He fell 2 floors and hit the lower landing spine first. The sound ended his part of the argument. A second attacker came over the upper rail instead of using the stairs. Lyra saw the shadow. She stamped 1 brass survey spike into the stair seam. Stone shifted under the attacker's landing foot by less than an inch. His ankle rolled. Lyra caught his wrist, used his momentum, and sent him headfirst through the section of railing, already weakened by audit glass. He grabbed the edge with one hand. Lyra looked down at him. You measured poorly. Then she stepped on his fingers. He fell. The third operative did not attack. She stood on the top platform in gray-fitted armor, holding a flat white key over the signal table. 1 vertical gold line marked the key. Celine's symbol. Cassian Vale, she said. Unregistered calibrator. Release the cores, and the League may preserve your residence. May? It is not my authority to promise more. Then you came underprepared. She turned the audit key. The realm editor vanished from my vision. Not flickered. Vanished. For the first time since Grayfen, there was no panel waiting behind my eyes. The operative smiled. I understood the smile. She thought she had removed the thing making us dangerous. Below the tower, a signal horn sounded. Then another. Then 3 in sequence. Meridian patrols changing route exactly as Bran had trained them. No panel needed. The operative's expression changed. Lyra threw her measuring hammer. It hit the woman's wrist. The audit key spun away. I crossed the platform before she recovered. She was fast. Better than the road raiders. Her short blade opened my sleeve and scored the armor beneath. I struck her once in the ribs. She twisted away. I drove her toward the open platform edge. She reached inside her coat. Lyra shouted. I saw the second glass sphere. I caught the operative's wrist with both hands and slammed it against the parapet. The sphere broke in her palm. White glass burst between us. Pain crossed my cheek and neck. Lyra was behind her. The fragments turned toward Lyra's brass harness. She twisted, but not fast enough. 3 long shards entered her upper back. She gasped and dropped to one knee. Something cold entered my chest. Not fear, the absence of it. I headbutted the operative once, hard enough to split her lip. Then I drove my sword beneath her breastplate at the side seam and pushed until the guard touched armor. Her eyes widened. I pulled the blade free. Blood ran over the white key symbol on her chest. She folded beside the signal table. The audit key on the floor cracked down the center.
Local interruption ended. Cause, audit key failure.
I did not look at it. I went to Lyra. She was breathing. Angry, controlled breathing, which was much better than the alternative. Do not pull them here, she said. I know. Good. You sound surprised. I have watched you improve roads by attacking them. Fair. We carried her down on a door panel because the stair was too narrow for a stretcher. The watchman was dead. The 2 fallen killers were dead. The operative died before reaching the lower floor. No joke improved that count. At Meridian, the infirmary cleared a room. The healer cut Lyra's coat and harness away from the wounds, removed the shallow fragments, and left the 3 deeper pieces for careful extraction. Lyra asked for me. I went in after washing blood from my hands. She lay face down beneath a linen sheet pulled to her waist, her back bare except for cleaned wounds and 3 white glass edges glittering near her shoulder blade. The old scar across her collarbone disappeared around the front of her body. The healer put forceps in my hand. She trusts your hands more than mine when the glass moves, she said. Slow, straight out. Wonderful. I had conquered a territory and was apparently now qualified for surgery by emotional recommendation. I sat beside Lyra. Tell me before you pull. I will. I touched the skin beside the first shard. Warm, tight with pain. Now. I pulled. Her back flexed under my fingers. Blood welled immediately. The healer pressed cloth into the wound. Second shard. Lyra's hand closed around my wrist before I pulled it. You saw the panel disappear. Were you afraid? Yes. Good. I looked at the side of her face. That is an unusual response to honesty. It means you understood what happened. I removed the second shard. She hissed through her teeth. The third sat deepest, close to the shoulder blade. I warned her, gripped it and pulled in one slow line. Her fingers tightened around my wrist hard enough to hurt. Then the glass came free. The healer pressed a pad down. Lyra did not release me immediately. Neither of us mentioned it. We had learned something worse than the existence of an enemy. The Crown League could switch my settings off. For the first time, becoming more powerful had produced a new requirement that no amount of optimization could erase. Everything important had to keep working when I was gone. The network failure came 3 weeks later, at the beginning of month 5, and proved we were not there yet. Bread failed in Reed Bank at dawn. By noon, the same gray, hard loaves were coming out of Meridian ovens and copperwash field kitchens. Tessa entered my hall carrying 1 loaf in both hands. She dropped it on my desk. The desk survived. Barely. Food, I asked? No. Weapon? Potentially. I broke the loaf open. The center was dry enough to powder. The realm editor showed perfect compliance with the milling template. It was obeying bad input. 3 territories had measured grain moisture too high. The global process responded by drying every batch longer before storage and milling. The setting was working exactly as instructed. Our data was wrong. Reed Bank North measure, Tessa said. Its reading updated the shared average last night. Lyra was already spreading the survey record beside her. No weather change. No flood. The grain cannot gain that much water in one evening. Sabotage. Or broken equipment. We assume sabotage until the instrument proves it is stupid. Bran came through the door. Food line at the South store is getting loud. How loud? Not riot loud. Hungry people deciding who to blame loud. Worse in the long term. I opened the global template controls. My first instinct was obvious. Restore the old moisture profile across all linked territories. 1 command. Immediate correction. Lyra put her hand over mine before I confirmed. No. 3 territories are wasting food. And you do not know whether the old profile is correct for all 5. So did the poisoned measurement. The words landed harder than they should have. I hated the delay because I could see the solution. That was exactly when I was most dangerous. Localize it, she said. Reed Bank suspends the shared grain moisture input. Meridian and Copperwash use their own readings until we verify every station. The local override protocol is dormant. Then wake it. I stared at the hidden line.
Local override protocol requires delegated calibrator authority.
Delegated. Not controlled from my chair. The system had found another way to irritate me personally. I assigned temporary override authority to Lyra for physical measurements and Tessa for stores and ration outputs. The cost was higher than 1 global command. I paid it. Gold branches separated on the map. Reed Bank's grain process detached from the shared profile. Meridian and Copperwash reverted to their verified local moisture readings. Within 4 hours, new bread came out soft. The North Station had been poisoned with a salt compound that distorted its reading crystal. A small thing. 1 handful of powder had almost damaged food across 3 territories because I had built a network that obeyed good data too well. We found the saboteur's tracks leading east. Darian had stopped merely watching. That evening, after the food lines calmed, Lyra found me alone, in the tower records room. I was rebuilding the permission structure. She closed the door. You almost overrode me. I did not. You almost did. Yes. She waited. I knew what she wanted. Not apology, explanation. On Earth, I had spent 2 years rebuilding a failing supply system. I had found the bad contracts, the wrong forecasts, and the executives hiding inventory errors. When the crisis ended, they reversed half the changes because a vice president disliked admitting his division caused the shortage. 6 months later, the company collapsed anyway. I hate having correct work reversed by someone who understands less than I do, I said. Lyra leaned against the table. That is different from hating being powerless. No, it isn't. I finally said the part I usually buried under strategy. I was not only ambitious, I was afraid of being powerless again. I want enough authority that no one can ruin what I build because they have a larger title, I said. Every time the network works, I want more of it. More land, more control, fewer people above me. There is no one above you here. Celine's League just turned my power off in a tower. And now you want to make sure no one can do that again? Yes. Then give me permanent authority to stop unsafe global settings. I looked at her. She did not soften the demand. If a measurement is compromised, if terrain makes a template dangerous, or if expansion requires hiding civilian risk, I freeze that setting locally. You can review it afterward. You cannot override me during the immediate safety window. That is broad. It needs to be. You could stop a military road during war. If the road will collapse under your army? Yes. I almost smiled. That answer sounded very Lyra. I opened the authority panel. Keeper of boundaries, local safety override holder, Lyra Saren, duration, permanent until public compact revision. I confirmed it. The panel flashed gold. Lyra watched my face. Painful? Extremely. Good. She touched 2 fingers to the cut on my cheek, left by audit glass. The wound had nearly healed, but her thumb traced just below it. You are learning. I preferred conquest. I know. Her hand remained there a second longer than necessary. By then, Brand's rolls showed 240 field soldiers and 48 scouts, engineers and runners. 288 trained people across the compact. Then the southern alarm bells began. Darien had chosen excellent timing. The first report came from Stonefield, enemy infantry on the western road. The second came from Reedbank, before the runner had finished drinking. Bridge barricades, grain wagons seized. The third arrived by signal tower from Copperwash, armed men at the ore crossing. 3 territories attacked within 20 minutes. Not enough force to conquer any one of them quickly. Enough to cut the network apart. Darien had finally understood what mattered. He was not attacking my towns. He was attacking the lines between them. Bran came into the command room already wearing armor. Crossed his chest beneath one steel shoulder guard. His knee brace had been rebuilt twice since Drybank. How many? I asked. 700, maybe more, divided across 3 fronts. Mostly coalition infantry. Darien's cavalry is holding east of Reedbank. Our strength? 288 trained. Less if you want every corps guarded. I do. Then I have 240 available for crossings and mobile response. Tessa entered behind him with 3 ledgers, and no visible concern for military drama. Market notices just arrived. 3 outside merchants suspended grain sales to compact territory. Identical wording? Yes. Darien had paired steel with commerce. It meant he believed we still needed his market. I looked at the linked map. We did not need to beat 700 people in one battle. We needed to keep our roads open long enough for Darien's coalition to run short of food, pay, and replacement parts. Bran, field command is yours. Hold crossings. Do not chase beyond prepared ground. He nodded. Tessa, food and ammunition move by depot priority, not territory ownership. If Reedbank has extra arrows and Copperwash needs them, they stop being Reedbank's arrows. They already stopped being Reedbank's arrows when I stamped them. Excellent. Do not sound pleased. I am missing 14 bundles. Lyra, road condition and water routes. I am already closing the low ford. The rain upstream gives us 6 hours of higher flow. I opened domain architect. Global logistics priority. Defense construction sequence. Field repair training conversion. Combat maintenance civic recovery. Siege cycle. I did not increase training intensity. I changed where already produced things went. That was enough. Gold lines moved across the basin map. At Stonefield, 28 defenders held a timber bridge against more than 100 attackers, because every broken shield was replaced from a cart 30 yards behind them. When a spear shaft snapped, the iron head went onto another standard shaft in less than a minute. At Copperwash, engineers dropped pre-cut wall frames into the ore crossing. The enemy burned the first barricade. The second stood behind it before the ashes cooled. At Reedbank, Bran commanded the main line personally. I reached it by relay cart before sunset. The road depot horses changed every 12 miles. The carts used the same wheel fittings. The signal towers cleared crossings ahead of us. Meridian Corps to Reedbank had once been most of a day. The military relay did it in 4 hours. I arrived to find the coalition trying to force the eastern bridge. Brand's shield wall occupied the near end. Reedbank civilians moved water buckets and bolt cases behind them. The enemy had built 2 rough mantlets and was pushing archers forward under cover. Darian's men looked better. White-red armor, proper helmets, long shields. The lesser coalition troops looked hungry. That interested me more. Casualties, I asked? 2 dead here, Brand said. 1 at Stonefield, 3 at Copperwash. 6 total. I absorbed the number. 6 people, not units. No joke belonged near it. Enemy? Not enough to matter if they keep being replaced. The bridge shuddered under a ram strike against our forward gate. A Reedbank runner arrived with a pot of stew. Bran looked at it. I am commanding. You can command while chewing. Tessa's field kitchen had been set behind a bridge wall. It was feeding defenders, runners, wounded, and the families who had moved away from exposed farmhouses. Across the river, I could see the coalition camp. Smoke from 6 cook fires. Not enough for the bodies I could count. I opened the captured pay orders our scouts had taken from 2 messengers that morning. The 2 lesser lords had been promised Darien-subsidized grain on day 3. It was day 4. The grain had not arrived, because our scouts had not attacked it. They had simply cut the draft teams loose from 3 coalition wagons and driven the oxen into the woods. No oxen, no grain. I almost felt insulted by how little violence logistics sometimes required. Send copies across the bridge. Bran glanced at me. To the enemy? Yes. Their pay orders, their missing food, our ration schedule. You want to show them we are eating? I want them to know why they are not. We tied sheets to blunt bolts and fired them over the river. For 20 minutes, nothing happened. Then shouting started in the coalition camp. One officer tore a page in half. Another read his twice. A group of infantrymen watched our field kitchen issue bowls to civilians standing behind a wall. The contrast did more damage than an arrow volley. Darian's force tried one hard push before dark. The mantlets came first. Archers behind them. Infantry packed into the bridge lane. Bran waited. Now, our engineers released the locking pins beneath the first bridge deck section. The planks did not collapse. The front coalition rank lost footing at once. Shields struck shields. Men piled forward. Our crossbows fired into the compressed mass from both flanks. Bolts entered necks, thighs, and faces through gaps no armor could cover. The bridge filled with screaming. Then the defenders advanced 3 steps. Only 3. Enough to push the front bodies backward into the men behind them. The coalition broke contact. Bronn did not chase. By morning, 1 lesser lord withdrew. By noon, the second did the same. They did not join me. They simply decided Darian's promise was not worth starving their own troops, while Meridian served hot food behind the wall. The blockade had been designed to starve us. On day 5, the coalition ran out of bread first. I stood on the Reedbank Bridge and looked at abandoned tents across the river. That was when the scale of my advantage finally stopped feeling theoretical. Darien had more prestige, better cavalry, and richer armor. I had 5 territories that repaired each other, fed each other, and replaced parts without asking which lord had forged them. Every territory I added made the next one cheaper to defend. Conquest was no longer adding land. It was compounding infrastructure. I wanted more immediately. Tessa ruined the moment with a message from Tithefort. Her brother was alive. Orvin wanted her ledger access in exchange for keeping him that way. The message came sealed in blue wax with a strip of cloth inside. Tessa recognized the cloth before I did. Her face went white. My mother made that shirt. No one spoke. Tessa Rook will correct Meridian store records to reflect a 30% reserve shortfall. She will provide the corrected copies to 3 named merchant houses. Her brother continues breathing until sunset tomorrow. Bran's hands closed into fists. Give me 200. No, I said. He has a hostage. And Tithefort has walls, a dam, narrow stairs, and prepared enforcers. A blind attack kills the hostage first. Tessa was still reading the note. Then she stood, walked to the core terminal, and placed her ledger seal against it. What are you doing? I asked, removing myself.
Public store, signing authority, Tessa Rook suspend, voluntarily.
Yes. The panel flashed, her access closed. Tessa put the seal on the table. He cannot force me to falsify what I cannot sign. Bran looked at her. Your brother. I know where my brother is. Her voice shook once, then stopped. Do not trade 3 territories' food records for him. If I ask you to do that tomorrow, do not listen to me. I hated the sentence, not because it was wrong, because it removed the easy thing I could promise. I will get him out during the Tithefort assault, I said. I will not send a small team into a prepared hostage room tonight. Tessa nodded. Do not promise he lives. I met her eyes. I promise I will make the best rescue attempt I can, without sacrificing civilians, or the whole army. Good. It was honest. That night, Bran argued for immediate battle anyway. Darien's two lesser allies had withdrawn. His coalition was weaker. Orvin expected hesitation because of the hostage. Bran wanted to hit the remaining army before it regrouped. I wanted one more fracture. Tessa's records showed Darien's cavalry fee debt had come due. Our captured blockade orders showed Orvin had promised reimbursement from Tithefort water levies. I copied both documents and sent them to every remaining coalition officer we could reach. Darien had built the alliance on the image that he could pay for strength. Orvin had built his rule on the image that water scarcity was natural. The documents proved both images were expensive lies. Darien did not collapse. I respected him for that. He did something more dangerous. He moved before the political damage finished spreading. 360 War Foundry Cavalry crossed south at dawn and struck toward Lyra's relay station. A captured advance order made the target explicit. Lyra Saren, alive if possible. Darien wanted the woman who mapped my roads and held the new safety override. The station also carried updated terrain maps, road schedules, and local override keys. Taking Lyra and the station would not destroy Meridian. It would blind us long enough for Tithefort to breathe and tell Darien how our local overrides worked. Bran looked at the map. Give me command. I did not ask for the plan first. If I demanded every detail before he moved, I was not really giving him command. Full field command, I said. Until Darien's cavalry is broken, or you withdraw. Bran's eyes held mine for 1 second. Then he saluted. Lyra had spent weeks mapping the old rice fields south of Reedbank. Most were dry now, because Orvin had redirected water years earlier. Raised maintenance strips crossed them in narrow lines of packed gravel. The unmarked fields only looked equally solid. We reopened 2 upstream channels during the night. Water moved under the cracked surface, instead of over it. By sunrise, the unmarked fields held a skin of dry earth above black mud. Bran sent 40 scouts ahead. Their orders were ugly. Let Darien see them. Run. Stay on the marked reinforced strips. The first contact came mid-morning. Darien's cavalry spotted 12 scouts near the relay station and charged. The scouts fled south. White-red riders followed. Fast. Too fast. 4 scouts died before reaching the first turn. One horse caught a runner from behind and drove him face-first into the gravel. Another scout took a saber across the back. 2 more disappeared beneath hooves when they missed the reinforced strip by inches. Bran watched from a low ridge through a brass scope. His jaw tightened. He did not send the reserve early. That was command, not feeling less, holding the plan while feeling all of it. The surviving scouts reached the red marker stakes. Darien's cavalry followed. The first 50 riders crossed safely. Then the ground failed. Not dramatically. Worse. One horse sank to the knee. The rider behind struck it. Then 10 animals lost footing at once. Heavy War Foundry armor turned every fall into a trap. Horses screamed as legs broke beneath them. Riders hit the mud and plate that weighed too much to stand quickly. The center ranks tried to turn. The rear ranks were still charging. 360 cavalry became one compressed mass of steel, animals, and panic. Bran raised his flag. Meridian crossbows fired from the irrigation berms. The bolts were not aimed at breastplates. They took horses at the neck, riders at the visor gaps, men trying to crawl out of mud. Darien reacted quickly. He always did. His personal guard found one of the reinforced maintenance strips and formed a wedge toward the western berm. Reserve, Bran shouted. Our shield infantry came down the marked paths at a run, not toward the trap center, toward Darien's escape strip. The first collision threw men backward on both sides. War Foundry cavalry hit harder than anything we had faced in Arc 1. Even half-stuck horses carried brutal mass. A rider's lance entered a Meridian shield, punched through the wood, and drove into the defender's chest. The man died before he hit the ground. Bran stepped into the gap. His spear caught the rider below the arm. The horse kept moving. The spear tore free with blood down the shaft. Darien saw him. For 1 second, the battle narrowed to the 2 commanders. Darien's gold-blonde hair had come loose beneath his helmet. His white-red armor was filthy to the waist. "Oric," he shouted. "I can restore your claim core." Bran actually laughed. One short sound. "My knee already gives me enough territory." Then he signaled the second shield line. They closed the strip. He got logistics. His cavalry tried 3 more exits. Each one ended at a marked berm, a prepared spear line, or mud too deep for plated horses. When he finally broke east, fewer than a quarter of his riders remained together. Bran did not pursue far. He had won the objective. The mobile wing was gone. Then he stepped off the berm and his right knee collapsed. I reached him before the medics. He slapped my hand away once, then accepted it the second time. Do not say efficient, he warned. I was going to say beautiful. That is worse. Darien escaped. His cavalry did not. Tithefort was now isolated, and I had exactly 2 days before Orvan's next hostage deadline. Tithefort sat across the main basin channel, like someone had built a fortress around a dam, and then taught the fortress to collect taxes. 3 stone tiers climbed from the water. The lower district held mills and warehouses. The middle district held barracks, workshops, and civilian housing. The upper tier held Orvan's hall and the territory core directly above the dam controls. 780 armed defenders were registered inside. I had 278 trained people left after the blockade and rice fields. On paper, that looked bad. Fortunately, paper was Tessa's department, and she had spent the last 4 months teaching me not to fear numbers before asking what they represented. Orvan did not have 780 loyal enforcers. He had fewer than 400 men who depended on him directly. The rest were conscripts, water workers, debt soldiers, and town guards whose families lived behind the same walls Orvan was threatening to flood if he lost. So before the first shield moved, we fired surrender terms into the city. Not speeches, terms. Lay down arms away from civilians and receive review, food, and the right to return home if no violent crime was proven. Dam workers would retain jobs. Household property would not be seized. Water contracts based on Orvan's illegal diversion would be void. Any officer destroying gates, stores, or civilian housing after surrender terms were issued would be tried personally. Lyra attached copies of the original canal charter. Tessa attached Orvan's false store records. I attached nothing inspirational. The facts were enough. By afternoon, 37 guards had quietly left the outer wall. By dusk, 2 mill companies refused orders to burn grain. Orvan responded by hanging 1 deserter above the middle gate. That clarified the remaining sides. Our plan had 4 parts. Bran would lead the visible assault up the western stairs with 150 shields and spears. His job was to keep Orvan's loyal enforcers facing him. Lyra would take 40 scouts and engineers through a maintenance tunnel beneath the eastern mill tier and reach the dam controls. Tessa would remain in the lower district once breached, with 38 runners, medics, and store teams. Her job was supplies first, prisoners second, records third. I would take 50 soldiers through the central service route toward the core. Success meant 3 things. The dam survived. Tessa's brother came out if he was still alive. The core became mine before Orvan could destroy enough infrastructure to lock the transfer. The assault began at first light. Bran's shields hit the western stairs under a storm of bolts. The stairs were only 12 men wide. Orvan's defenders had barricaded every third landing with timber frames and iron spikes. Bran's front line went up beneath overlapping shields while engineers carried hooked chains behind them. The first volley sounded like hail on a metal roof. The second found gaps. One defender took a bolt through the cheek. Another dropped with iron buried in his thigh. Thomas Hall, the ferryman Bran had turned into a shield lieutenant, caught a bolt beneath the collar and went down on the 3rd step. Bran saw him fall and kept the formation moving because stopping under the towers would kill more. At the first barricade, the engineers threw hooks over the crossbeam. The frame shifted 6 inches. Enemy spears came through the gap. A Meridian shieldman screamed as one entered beneath his ribs. Bran shoved his own shield over the opening and yelled for the second hook. The barricade tore free. Our line surged through. Orvan's enforcers met them at arm's length. There was no room for sword flourishes. Men punched with shield rims, stabbed beneath arms, and used bodies as footing because the stairs gave them nowhere else to stand. Blood ran down the stone steps faster than rainwater. That was the front door. I took the service route. Lyra's maps had found it from old maintenance marks buried beneath newer plaster. The entrance opened behind a storage shed in the lower district. My 50 moved in 2 files. We reached the first inner gate before the alarm changed. Then Orvan revealed his audit glass. White lines flashed across the arch. Back. Too late for the first 3 men. The glass wall shattered inward. One soldier's forearm opened from wrist to elbow. Another took fragments across the face. The third fell with a white shard buried in his throat. He drowned in his own blood before the medic reached him.
Local template instability. Infrastructure destruction detected. Authority transfer risk rising.
Orvan had learned enough from the Crown League to poison his own city against capture. Mark every glass frame, I ordered. Do not break them unless we have cover. We went around the first trap through a side workshop. At the next landing, loyal enforcers charged us. The hallway was 5 men wide. Our standardized shields locked. Their first impact stopped us anyway. These were not levy collectors. They wore heavy blue scale and carried short chopping blades designed for close corridors. One blade came over my shield and split the helmet of the man beside me. He dropped without a sound. I rammed forward with the line, Step. 5 shields moved. Step. Again. We did not fight for kills. We fought for space. The enforcers gave 1 yard. A man slipped on blood. Our front rank went over him. The corridor broke open. The fight became individual for 10 ugly seconds. I caught a chopping blade on my forearm plate and felt the impact numb my fingers. I drove my sword into the attacker's stomach below his scales, twisted and pulled. He folded into me. I shoved him aside and nearly stepped on a severed hand. Someone screamed behind me. Someone else yelled that the gate was opening. We pushed upward. Across the city, Lyra's tunnel team reached the eastern dam chamber. I knew because the signal line flashed twice. Then stopped. No more signals. I could not help her without abandoning my route. That was the entire point of delegation. It remained emotionally terrible. Tessa's team breached the lower stores 30 minutes later. Orvan's officers had locked civilians outside while keeping Vrain inside. Tessa did not wait for formal conquest authority. She ordered the doors broken. One runner reminded her the stores were technically enemy property. People are technically hungry, she said. The doors came down. Food went to civilians and wounded from both sides. Then she found the prison list. Her brother's name was on the upper holding cells. She did not leave her post. She sent the list to me. That decision cost her more than anything I asked that day. I carried it upstairs. The central route ended at the second gate beneath Orvan's hall. His chief enforcer waited there. Marshal Vare was built like a gate himself. Thick neck, blue-black plate, a square hammer in both hands. The armor around him was stained with white dust from audit glass. Behind him, the portcullis had already begun lowering. If it closed, my 50 would be trapped below while Orvan reached the core. "Hold the gate," I shouted. 4 soldiers ran beneath it with timber braces. The iron teeth came down. One brace snapped. A soldier's leg was caught below the knee. The portcullis crushed bone with a wet crack. His scream filled the chamber. The other 3 kept pushing. Vare came for them. I intercepted him. His hammer hit my shield and broke the lower rim. The force drove me sideways into the wall. My left arm went numb. He swung again. I ducked. Stone exploded behind my head. Vare was stronger than me. Not slightly. Enough that direct blocking would eventually convert my skeleton into a teaching aid. So I stopped blocking. I backed toward the broken audit frame, beside the gate. He followed. "Preferences, Lord," he said. "Orvan should have drowned your swamp." He tried water. Vare swung. I moved right. The hammer struck the remaining audit glass support. White crystal burst across his left side. His plate protected his chest. His visor did not protect his eye slit. He jerked back. I stepped inside the hammer arc and stabbed under his raised arm. The blade entered at the armpit and stopped against bone. Vare roared and slammed his forehead into mine. Light flashed. I lost the sword. His gauntlet closed on my throat. He lifted. My boots left the floor. For a moment, the entire regional sovereignty project faced a serious personnel issue. I reached for the dagger at his belt. He saw it and tightened his grip. I could not breathe, so I drove 2 fingers into the glass embedded around his eye. He screamed. His grip opened. I dropped, took his dagger, and pushed it up beneath his jaw. The point entered soft tissue, then the roof of his mouth. His body locked. I drove until the hilt struck skin. Vare fell backward with me on top of him. Blood poured from his mouth and nose. I stayed there for 1 breath, then another. The portcullis groaned. Work first. I got up. The trapped soldier was still alive. His lower leg was not salvageable. "Cut him free," I ordered, then raised the gate. We reached the upper cells 5 minutes later. Tessa's brother was alive. Barely. He had been beaten, dehydrated, and chained to a wall with 6 other prisoners. The enforcer guarding them had already fled. I cut the chains. "Tessa," he whispered, "running my invasion better than I am." His eyes closed. "That sounds like her." We sent him down with medics. Then the dam shook. A deep impact rolled through the stone. Lyra. I ran. The core stair climbed inside the dam tower. Halfway up, the wall on the east side cracked, and water sprayed through the mortar. Another impact. The Rome editor screamed warnings.
Dam control damage. Transfer stability, 71%.
Orvan was destroying his own infrastructure. At the same time, Lyra's signal finally returned. 1 long flash, then 3. Tunnel collapsed. Sabotage route blocked. She had sealed herself on the dam side to stop Orvan's demolition crew. I kept climbing. Brand's frontal assault broke the middle gate below. I heard the compact horn echo through Tithefort. Not victory, entry. 9 of ours would be dead by the end of the day, Tomas among them. I did not know the final count yet. I only knew the core was above me, and Orvan was running out of things to hide behind. He waited in the core chamber, wearing gold-trimmed blue brocade over armor that had clearly never met mud before today. 2 guards stood with him. One lowered his weapon when he saw me. My soldiers killed the second before I reached the dais. Orvin held a demolition seal above the core. If you touch it, the west sluice drops, he said. Half the lower district floods. Lyra already blocked your demolition tunnel. His face moved. Only slightly. Enough. You do not know which gate. No, but you do. I looked past him at the core interface. The demolition seal was linked to a physical line running west. The line was dark. Lyra had cut it. Orvin followed my eyes. Then he ran for the core. I reached him first. He was not a fighter. That did not make the struggle clean. He clawed at my face, caught my cut cheek, and reopened it. I drove him into the stone dais. He struck the edge with his mouth. Teeth broke. Blood sprayed across the blue core casing. He kept reaching for the seal. I twisted his arm behind his back until the shoulder came out with a dull pop. He screamed, "Yield the territory." Never. I pressed his face against the core. Then I take it. My claim authority touched Tithefort. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then every core I owned answered. Meridian, Drybank, Reedbank, Stonefield, Copperwash. 5 gold lines struck Tithefort at once. Legal control challenge resolved. Orvin Mauk, governing authority forfeited by illegal water diversion, civilian coercion, infrastructure destruction, and failed defense. Tithefort core transfer available. I accepted. The world changed color. Gold exploded down the dam walls. I saw it through every open stair and window. Thin lines raced through Tithefort streets, into mills, warehouses, sluices, workshops, and barracks.
Template propagation active.
The first change was water. 3 leaking gate seals tightened as maintenance frames shifted into their correct positions. 1 cracked sluice remained cracked, because the editor did not perform miracles, but its pressure warning appeared on every linked repair board. The second change was inventory. Store ledgers recalculated against physical stock. False reserve categories vanished. Hidden grain appeared in 3 sealed warehouses Orvin's officials had marked empty. The third was the mills. 2 stopped automatically because their grindstones were misaligned. A third adjusted feed speed. Flour loss dropped in front of workers who had spent years sweeping half their output from the floor. Broken tools moved into repair queues instead of scrap piles. Water routing exposed an entire unused irrigation branch. The dam workforce registry identified engineers who had been assigned as guards because they were physically large. Tithefort had spent years pretending scarcity was a law of nature. My territory core looked at the same city and said, essentially, have you considered not wasting everything? I stood above a bleeding Orvin and watched a regional capital become more productive before the battle had even fully ended. That was the first moment I understood the terrifying version of my own future. Every conquest would not merely add what the enemy possessed, it would upgrade what they had been too incompetent to use. I did not gain one city. I gained the city Orvin should have had. And the next city would inherit what this one taught the network. Oops, I was becoming a problem. We found Lyra in the eastern dam chamber after cutting through the collapsed tunnel from both sides. She was sitting against the wall in a torn teal coat, while a medic wrapped her shoulder and back. Audit glass had cut her in 6 places. Blood had dried down one arm. Her silver hair had come loose from its braid and stuck to her face. She looked at me. You took your time. You collapsed the route. Yes, that slows travel. Yes. I crouched in front of her. You are impossible. You are welcome. I touched my forehead to hers for 1 second. Then we went back to work. Tessa met her brother in the lower infirmary. I did not enter. Some victories belonged to the people who had paid for them. Bran arrived last, walking with a new cane, because his right knee had swollen until the brace no longer fit. He had diverted 30 soldiers away from the upper assault to evacuate families from a burning mill block. That choice cost us time. It saved 43 civilians. I accepted it without argument. By sunset, Orvin sat chained in the same public hall where he had once sold water contracts. Tithefort belonged to Meridian. The basin no longer had a waterlord. It had a network. Winning Tithefort took 1 morning. Making it ours took longer. We did not demand an oath from 4,000 frightened people while blood was still drying on the stairs. The first order was water. The second was food. The third was a public inventory. Tessa restored her signing authority only after her brother was stable. Then, she took a table into the lower market and posted every captured store total where anyone could read it. People gathered slowly. Most did not cheer. They checked the numbers. That pleased her more. Orvin had claimed the city held 9 days of emergency grain. The physical audit found 34 days at normal ration levels, plus seed stock that had been hidden from public records. The crowd did not become loyal to me when they saw it. They became angry at him. That was healthier. Lyra reopened the public canal branch from the original charter and appointed local water crews to each gate. She refused my suggestion that the main dam control sit permanently under one central office. 3 signatures, she said. Local water chief, survey office, and emergency military authority during attack. Slower, harder to steal. I looked at Orvan's empty chair. Bran chose a local defensive commander and immediately began arguing with him about whether Tidefort's upper stairs were defensible or merely tall. I let them enjoy that. At the first shared meal, Tithefort residents ate beside compact soldiers in the lower mill square. Not a celebration, mostly because the kitchens there still worked and everyone was exhausted. A child asked me whether I was the new Waterlord. No? What are you? I considered several answers. Tessa answered from the next table. Expensive. The child accepted that immediately. 4 days after capture, the population register stabilized. Tithefort added 4,045 residents. We had lost 19 compact citizens across the blockade, rice fields, and final assault. Final registered population across 6 linked territories. 269 trained military personnel remained alive after the 19 deaths, though 31 of the survivors were temporarily unfit for duty. 4 months earlier, I had entered this expansion with 178 people and a damaged canal gate. Now I controlled the basin's dam, 5 surrounding territories, standardized roads, ore, timber, grain depots, relay towers, and a city large enough to make my first territory look like a campsite. From a distance, Meridian still looked poor. Our soldiers wore standardized black field armor instead of polished ceremonial plate. Our carts were plain, our depots were square, our banners were simple. Darian's surviving scouts reported that Tithefort appeared under-decorated for a conquered capital. Excellent. Decoration consumed maintenance hours. I would consider statues after the continent surrendered. It came from 3 independent survey territories north of the basin. They had heard the Crown League revoked her professional seal and offered to recognize her as chief surveyor of a new neutral mapping state. No Cassian, no Meridian military authority, her own institution. She showed me the letter on the dam roof at sunset. My first thought was strategic. Losing Lyra would damage expansion, water law, local overrides, and about 12 systems I preferred not to admit depended on one person. My second thought was worse. I did not want her to go. Do you want it? I wanted something like it for years. I kept my face still. That was not my question. She looked out over the reopened canal. Below us, Tithefort mills turned in a shared rhythm. Farther west, signal arms moved against the evening sky. I want maps that cannot be rewritten by whoever owns the nearest army, she said. They are offering that. And? I have seen what happens when you own the nearest army. That sounds promising? It was not finished. Of course not. She turned to me. You keep giving me reasons to be afraid of you. There was no softness in the sentence. I let it land. Then you listen when I say stop. You gave me a safety override, even though you hated it. You let Bran own a battlefield. You let Tessa open an enemy store before you held the core. You keep choosing power. Yes. But lately you have stopped confusing power with doing everything yourself. The wind moved loose silver strands across her face. I am staying. My chest released tension I had not acknowledged. Why? Because the map is becoming real here. And because I want to see what you become when someone who can tell you no stays beside you. I stepped closer. She did not move away. I could feel her breath in the cool air. There is something else I should make official, I said. Her eyebrow lifted. If this is a title, I am leaving. I opened the realm editor. Keeper of Boundaries, Lyra Saren, authority expanded. May suspend unsafe global settings in any Meridian territory, pending review. I confirmed it. Gold light passed once across the map below us. She looked at the panel, then at me. You just gave me authority over all 6 territories. Only when I am wrong. She caught the front of my black coat and pulled me down before I could answer. The kiss was not tentative. Neither was it rushed. Her mouth was warm against mine. One hand remained at my collar. Mine settled at her waist, careful of the healing glass cuts beneath her coat. For several seconds, there was no territory panel, no war map, and no next conquest. Just Lyra. When we separated, she stayed close enough that our foreheads touched. I meant what I said, she whispered. If the map becomes more important to you than the people on it, I stop you. That is why I gave you the authority. Her hand tightened once at my collar. Then, she let it rest there. The dam bells rang before either of us moved. Not alarm bells, system bells. Every public core in Tithefort lit white. A projection appeared above the lower square large enough for the entire city to see. Celine Vark stood inside it. The same narrow face, the the same pale violet eyes, the same white half-mask crossed by one vertical gold line. This time, she was not secretly watching. She was addressing all 6 Meridian territories. Cassian Vale, she said. The Crown League recognizes evidence of illegal administrator access, unauthorized global template propagation, and unlawful calibration of protected grid functions. People stopped in the streets below. I opened the Realm editor. Celine raised one white audit key, the same kind of device her operative had used in the survey tower. Demonstration. The westernmost territory vanished from my gold network. Not physically.
Global propagation suspended. Stonefield. Audit freeze. 0:30.
30 seconds. Stonefield's saw sequence stuttered. Linked inventory stopped updating. The local aptitude arch went dark. A relay depot reverted to its own stored schedules. But the carts kept moving. The sawyers knew their cuts. The defenders knew their rotations. The local storekeeper had paper copies. 29 seconds. 28. Celine watched too. I wondered whether she had expected panic. There was none. At 0, the gold line returned. Stonefield synchronized in one clean pulse. Celine's expression did not change. The next suspension will not be a demonstration. The projection vanished. The damn square remained silent. Lyra stood beside me, one hand still resting against mine. The Crown League had just proved it could touch my cheat. It had also proved something else. My territories no longer died when the cheat blinked. I looked over the city, the dam, the signal towers, and the gold routes disappearing toward 5 other cores. 6 territories had made me a regional sovereign. The Crown League controlled the system above all of them. So there was only one sensible response.